across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Hopefully we're going to keep you warm and entertained this morning through this horrible, horrible storm. Rotten weather in late January. January's got to be over soon, for the love of God. But lots to talk about. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it's lovely to have your company. I'm on your show until on your airwaves until 1 o'clock. Plenty to come. If you do miss anything of the show, do go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe and you never have to miss a thing. And also, if you do it, then I can just stop nagging you about it. It's like a marriage, this. It's just like a marriage. If you just do it, I won't have to carry on nagging. Are we all clear? We are. Right, coming up in this hour, we're going to be discussing Suella Braverman being the latest Tory MP to defect to reform. We're going to be talking about Keir Starmer off to China tonight. He always goes on these trips just before PMQs, doesn't he? I don't know why he needs to go to China, because whatever he's planning to discuss with the Chinese, they already know about. Because apparently the Chinese have been hacking the phones of not just senior officials in Downing Street for years, including the aides of three different British Prime Ministers under the Tories, possibly actually hacking the actual Prime Ministers as well. Also, we're going to be talking about the events planner with rejection sensitivity. Don't we all have that? Who's won a £12,000 payout from an insane tribunal judge after being apparently triggered by her boss, who told her to get back in your box. I've said a lot worse. There's a lot of people up for a lot of big payouts from here. Rejection sensitivity. What the beep, beep, beeping, beep is that? Anyway, someone wasn't parented very well. That's all I'm going to say. We'll talk about that. Plenty more besides, including, again, that thing that just never happens but keeps on happening, which is illegal migrants claiming asylum who just keep on committing crimes as bad as, yes, rape and sexual assault. Because it never happens, and if you talk about it, you're a bigot and you're a racist. But when it happens, it just keeps on happening. Yeah, the latest Pakistani asylum seeker in this case, who has been convicted of raping a young woman, 18, in a park, well, a gang rape effectively, with a mate, because that's what friends do apparently. But anyway, we'll be talking about that, plenty more besides. So much to discuss with my guest joining me today, editor at Spiked Online, Tom Slater. Hello to you.
Morning.
Nice to see you on this channel for a change. Dirty two-timer.
I don't know what you're talking about.
He's everywhere. You can't escape him on the airwaves these days, and very rightly so, because it's always fantastic to have you in the studio, as you know. My question to the audience today, I'll put to you. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman. We had a bit of a debate in the office. I've always called her Suella Braverman. I'm 99.9% sure it's Braverman. But after one of my colleagues on the sister radio station Times got in very big upset about Robert Jenrick apparently mispronouncing Kimmy Badenoch's name as Badenoch, and apparently that makes you sexist. I want to be careful. I mean, I should message Suella herself and find out whether I doubt she even cares, but I'm pretty sure it's Suella Braverman. But don't want her telling off from Times Radio for that. But former Home Secretary Suella Braverman is the latest Tory defector to reform. Front page of a lot of the papers. I want to know, though, from you, as I know a lot of you are Tory voters and were Tory voters. I know a lot of you are now reform voters. I know this from the messages, the calls, the messages we get. I want to know, are Tory defections good or bad for reform's appeal to voters at the next election? Tell us why you think they're good, tell us why you think they're bad, tell us all your thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts on that, and indeed any of the topics we're talking about today. You're always welcome to set the agenda with your own phone calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls to charge at the national rate. All together now. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. Tom, very disappointed you didn't join in there.
Sorry about that. It's my cue.
Not my cue.
I thought you were going to make the question, how do you pronounce
that was the question. How do you
go?
Good. Is this latest defection, is that good or bad for reform?
I think it's on balance a good thing. It's certainly bolstered the sense that all of the momentum is behind reform, that not only are they building up more voters in the country, but also they're peeling off more and more Tory MPs. I also think that when you're talking about defections, there's defections and there's defections. If you've got Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman, two people who, regardless of what...
He's gone for Braverman.
Suella Braverman, pick your poison. They are national political figures. They're also people who, unlike some of the earlier defections, were much more consistent on some of the issues, i.e. migration, that have animated the Reform revolt. And also, I think I understand this point that people make, that you don't want to look like a quote-unquote retirement home for Tory MPs. At the same time, defections have always been a part of every insurgent political party in recent political history. You know, when Labour was leapfrogging the Liberals in the early 20th century, I think they had like 50 MPs who made the move over in the course of 10 or 15 years. When the SDP were trying to break the mould, they had about 30 MPs defect, the vast majority from Labour. But it's always been a sign that one ship is sinking and the other one is rising. So I think as long as it's the right people to fit the party, then...
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we found that fascinating thing with Andy Streeter and Baroness Ruth Davidson, apparently with the help of Gavin Barwell, former chief sort of advisor, well, chief henchman or whatever, effectively, for Theresa May. And apparently putting together, trying to put, you know, their stamp on. They reckon there are 7 million right-wing, well, centre and centre-right voters who are looking for a party, feel that they're homeless at the moment, and they think that they can take the Tories. Now, there is an argument that the Conservatives and the I suppose the sort of just the sort of, you know, the centre ground of the Conservatives kind of shifts to the left every time someone like your Jenricks or your Suella Bravermans or others leave the party, or and others, and it does actually sort of shift things within the Conservative Party as well as the Tory Party, as well as the Reform Party. But as lots of people are pointing out, this is getting the old band back together with Boris Johnson. Given the absolute loathing of Boris Johnson that many Reform people have, they moved to Reform because of Boris Johnson's betrayal on things like, okay, we'll get Brexit done. I mean, look, he made, I think, the very best of a very bad deal, given what Theresa May had already given away, short of literally starting from scratch, and frankly would have been years in the making. I don't think he could have done a better deal than he actually did, given where he was with Lord Frost at the time, at the helm on that. But the utter betrayal on immigration is absolutely shocking, on lockdown and all the welfare splurging, you name it. But it's been pointed out, Reform now has Boris Johnson's old Chancellor, Nadhim Zahawi, old Community Secretary, that's Robert Jenrick, old Culture Secretary, Nadine Dorries, old Attorney General, and of course she then went on to be Home Secretary, but she had been his Attorney General, Suella Braverman, his old Political Secretary, Danny Kruger, his old Skills Minister, Andrea Jenkin, his old Northern Powerhouse Minister, went on to be Party Deputy Chairman or Chairman, I lost track, Jake Berry. There were so many at one point. His old Health Minister, Maria Coalfield, also his Parliamentary Private Secretary, his Assistant Whip, and a Scottish Minister. That's an awful lot of old Tories. Now, here's the thing. I don't really put Nadine and Jake Berry, Nadine Dorries and Jake Berry, and possibly not even Nadine Zahawi, in the same category as your Robert Jenrick and your Suella Braverman and indeed your Danny Krugers, in terms of people who have been speaking out, and you can believe or not believe Robert Jenrick, but he did nevertheless resign over, he thought, of the failings of the Rwanda affair. Suella Braverman, she got forced out twice, one over rather just some questionable things, and one over, the fact that she wrote an article basically, saying her views as Home Secretary and got told off by Number 10. She has been at least consistent on this stuff, and certainly in private, this is what she's been saying for years, and she's been speaking out. So, again, a very easy fit. Fascinating to see some of the left-wing papers. I mean, again, like the Mirror saying, "Oh, this Tory nobody moving over to Reform," but they put it on the front page as their splash. It's like, well, if you're putting it on the front page, she's clearly not a nobody. I mean, there's your answer there, isn't it?
There's a lot of cope going on, as they say on the internet. There's a lot of attempts to pretend like Reform aren't making the strides that they are. I mean, the way that we've become so accustomed to Reform leading in 200+ polls now, threatening to stage a real upset in the local election. It's been totally normalised. But even if they fall short at the next election, they are still odds on to, at the very least, replace the Conservative Party as the primary party of opposition or the party of the right in this country. Even if they fall short, even if Labour mounts some very unlikely comeback, that in and of itself would be a historic, seismic achievement, something that we haven't seen for a century.
The Conservative Party is the most successful political party in Europe,
and which is now
over a century.
Which is now, if reports are to be believed, pursuing a 60-seat strategy in an attempt to stem the losses as much as it possibly can. This is enormous stuff, and at every turn, for obvious reasons, both people on the left who want to discredit reform as well as the Conservatives who want to stop the bleeding as much as they possibly can, are going to downplay it, say these people are nobodies and whatever.
Yeah.
The thing is, aside from the individual figures, their backgrounds, what they've said in the past, whatever, the general direction of travel is that voters are moving towards reform. Increasingly, MPs are moving towards reform from the Conservatives. And that's what any of their critics need to reckon with, rather than pretending it's not happening.
And there's only 3 months more and a bit till deadline day, guys, for May the 7th, and the last time to defend. What did you make of the Conservative spokesperson's original statement saying it was all about Suella Braverman? It was always a matter of time, a matter of when. I can't read today, sorry. It was always a matter of when, not if, Suella Braverman would defect. The Conservatives did all we could to look after Suella's mental health, but she was clearly very unhappy. Big outcry on that, even from some staunch Tory MPs and supporters. They backtracked on that. Apparently it was a draft version. It shouldn't have been in your draft version, guys. No reason to think that Kemi Badenoch saw that, but that tells you the mindset. That is playing very nasty, very dirty, absolutely unacceptable.
I mean, we've all drafted a slightly mean-spirited tweet that never saw the light of day.
No, I post mine.
But this,
I write nice ones in draft and then go, nah.
But this is the opposition party in our country. Also, if it was a draft, but at the same time in the statement itself it says that this defection was foreseen, doesn't really make a lot of sense. Also, this draft was published and it's out for 2 hours. Before it was
there was
removed.
still an outcry. You're not like, oh God, what have you done? Yeah, exactly.
To be honest, almost more than it being a bit low, a bit unseemly, I think it's the incompetence that speaks to it as much as anything else. This is one thing about the Tory party that's being missed a bit at the moment. Everyone knows that they've lost loads of voters. Everyone knows they're increasingly losing MPs. It's also a slightly ramshackle organisation at the moment. It doesn't have a lot of money. A lot of the donors have left it, which is why you see mistakes like this happening. And you see things like Kemi Badenoch sacking Robert Jenrick on what looks like a Zoom call. They just don't really have the resources or the slickness.
Well, I mean, she was at home when she did that to get it over and done with. But the key thing is, I mean, this is also equally worthy of the Labour Party, and they're in government, and they've got no excuse. They have got the resources. I mean, we've got. So this is the two big parties, the two big beasts of British politics, are very much sort of on the back foot right now, despite one of them actually being in office with over 400 MPs. Looks like they may well lose one of their seats, though, the Gorton by-election. Now that Andy Burnham has been blocked from running in it. Likely that he is a big, very popular figure in the Manchester area, that he would have won the Gorton by-election, blocked from doing it. 50 Labour MPs have signed a letter, private letter apparently, already been leaked. These private letters get leaked, urging the Prime Minister to backtrack on this. PM is off, probably desperate to be never here, kowtow Keir, off to China, flying tonight, always does this just before PMQs, with this big fallout. Meanwhile, we've got an announcement about 2 o'clock today of the Reform candidate for Gorton. We're going to find out the weekend who the Labour candidate is. Big question mark now about who the Greens are going to stand, because Muslim Vote, this organisation set up back in 2023 that backed these Gaza MPs, 4 of the Gaza MPs, basically bringing out completely sectarian voting along religious lines. Basically, they're back in the Green Party. They haven't even announced their candidate yet, but it could well be the Green deputy, Mohsin Ali, many think, who shouted Allahu Akbar when he won a council election. I mean, this is not necessarily somebody that I think it's going to be a great benefit to Parliament to have in our great debating chamber. But if they're going to back the Greens, and it's 28% of the population is Muslim, although again that is a higher birth rate, more likely to be younger people who are not eligible to vote yet. We could see, that lefty vote split. We could see either Reform winning, or we could see Greens winning. No one seems to think that Labour's going to win it now. No, and I think this is one of the issues with blocking Andy Burnham. I mean, Keir Starmer was kind of damned if he did, damned if he didn't. I mean, any decision he made would make him look weak. Was it the right decision in the end? Well, was it the least wrong decision? It depends what your objective is. I mean, if it's to win this by-election, then Andy Burnham is by far the strongest candidate. He does have, whatever his shortcomings, which there are many, pretty good standing in Manchester. He has been re-elected mayor 3 times on quite large majority. They would likely have lost Manchester mayoralty, which is a bigger proposition. But of anyone who was standing in that race, in that by-election, if he wasn't blocked and was to be successful, his stature, I think, would
stand Labour in the best stead, shall we say, of returning that, rather than the vote becoming split.
But does a by-election, one seat, matter as much as the mayor of Greater Manchester, which is basically 20 constituencies?
Almost certainly not, but I think it's,
so it's
one of those things where it entirely depends. If it was trying to retain that parliamentary seat, it's probably the wrong decision. If it was trying to give Keir Starmer a stay of execution or whittle down at least the number of people who were trying to take his job, then it was obviously the right decision. But it's just this is the thing about Keir Starmer's Labour Party. It has no good choices anymore.
Yeah.
And really all it's involved in is trying to delay its eventual crumbling. And every decision needs to be read in that light at this point.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think anything's a sure thing in British politics anymore. That feels as inevitable as anything could be.
You think the Keir Starmer comeback is underpriced?
That would be. I mean, good God.
Not just squeaking the next election, but loved, adored.
Yeah, anyone who thinks Andy Burnham would be a better bet when he wants to apparently put Ed Miliband in as Chancellor. I mean, seriously. Again, I was saying, it would be a great week. It really would be a great week before we are absolutely back in caves. I mean, it's interesting. We've even got, some of the big unions now sort of saying, we are going to be in crisis under net zero policies from Ed Miliband. At some point in the next year, I mean, if he lasts that long, we're going to have to see the Prime Minister backtracking on this stuff. The Tories did. I've said that for years. Tories were going to, none of these policies survive any contact with reality, and they really, really don't. Will Keir Starmer survive contact with the Chinese? Now, we've got Xi Jinping, who's just ousted the last remaining possible challenger to him in the Chinese military command. The purge is complete. He has absolute power over that country. This guy he is the smiling assassin. I mean, quite literally, he is a murderous tyrant. But, Keir Starmer's off to kowtow to him, second biggest economy in the world. But it's emerged front page of the Telegraph today. China hacked the mobile phones of senior officials in Downing Street for several years. The closest aides of Boris Johnson, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak between 21 and 24 are believed to have been targeted. It's unclear whether they actually managed to hack the mobile phones of prime ministers. But we know that all those prime ministers had their mobile phones taken away from them. Basically, I remember Liz Truss saying, literally put in a sealed room. So that they couldn't access any more information. And, people like me sort of lost direct contact with these people for a while and couldn't work out why they weren't returning messages. But that was why their phones were taken away. So I think it's very likely that the Prime Ministers themselves were actually hacked as well. I mean, is there any point in us going to China? Presumably they're still doing the hacking. We're just giving them the Chinese embassy. Why don't we just literally say, pop into MI5 and MI6, pop into number 10, have a look at everything, save everyone some time?
I mean, it does feel like that would be the neatest solution, given the sort of... These stories come up and people pretend to be shocked and appalled by them. And you wonder why. First of all, because you're talking about the Chinese Communist Party, totalitarian, authoritarian, gives no truck for the rights of its own citizens, let alone the diplomacy and rights of people in this country. Also, the other thing that's worth saying is that even relatively friendly states spying on each other is a fact.
We had America spying
life.
On Germany, didn't
exactly.
we?
Angela Merkel's phone being hacked during the Obama.
I mean, I'm
years.
hoping we're spying on the Chinese. I just imagine we're not doing it as well as they've done it to us.
Quite, and also maybe you would think that they're not making it as easy as well. I mean, the way in which when you saw those various scandals, I mean, the fact that Boris Johnson basically had the same phone number for so many years, even when he was, in journalism or was a much lower-ranking politician. But at the same time, you think there would be some extra level of protection. Maybe there's a new phone which comes into play. Maybe it doesn't have to get as low-tech as, sealing these things in a plastic bag and telling them not to touch them during particularly sensitive meetings. This doesn't bode well for the security of the British state. But again, they make these decisions willfully. They, hand over the Royal Mint, as you say, despite its proximity to all of those fibre optic cables with all of that classified financial information, to the Chinese Communist Party, and then wonder why security is compromised.
It's mind-blowing.
It's from a position of weakness, as we know. They want to do business with China, but still, there's a line, surely.
But again, you can want to do business. There's this idea that, they won't do business with us. Yeah, they will. They need to sell. The entire Chinese economy relies on those exports. But maybe we shouldn't make it quite so easy. Again, they want to dump their electric vehicles on us, their solar panels, their wind turbines. They know they're weakening us. I mean, they are laughing their heads off as they help us deindustrialise. They really are. I think we can safely say this trip, he's going to end up in Japan afterwards, but we can safely say this trip is going to leave Britain worse off. There's no, I mean, the guy is a walking disaster when it comes to negotiations. I mean, genuinely, I would put a 3-year-old up against Keir Starmer in a negotiation for a lollipop. This man is so poor. Let's also talk about our other big ally, biggest economy in the world, biggest military in the world, and that is America, of course. Donald Trump, it's really interesting seeing his spokesperson, you know, just basically kind of rowing back from this absolute blanket support there has been for ICE agents, certainly in the wake of the killing of Renee Good when she was shot when she was in her car, screaming at, and let's face it, driving at an ICE agent. I always said, shouldn't have been there, shouldn't have driven her car, but it wasn't necessary for her to be shot, and that was the wrong thing to have done. But I can understand why, you know, why these things happen. I think these people who are protesting ICE agents doing their job are in the wrong themselves. But that doesn't. There are too many trigger-happy law enforcement officers on American streets, and we know that already. The killing of Alex Pretty is looking much more questionable. I mean, we've seen so many different angles, so much, you know, of what actually went on. Complete over-the-top reaction from the ICE agents. I can absolutely see why they thought he had a gun. When someone shouts gun, but they've actually recovered a gun, it's chaos. There's whistles. There's, you know, but, you know. Point blank shooting because they were convinced he had a gun. I think that they were going, where's the gun? Where's the gun? I'm willing to think that they thought that, but they created, as did the protesters as well, the chaos where that could happen. Now, the Border Control Commander Gregory Bavino, apparently a huge hated figure, and some of his immigration agents are basically going to be ordered to depart not just Minneapolis but also the state as well. The border czar, Tom Homan, who apparently is a little bit more conciliatory, he's going to lead on-the-ground efforts in the Minnesota city after the shooting of Alex Pretty. There's been a sort of a row back by the American authorities, less sort of gung-ho, you know, they were in the right. I mean, some of the claims by Greg Bavino, I mean, you know, he's almost as bad as some other figures in the American administration, just basically sort of accusing this guy of being a terrorist and about to try and commit mass murder. Yeah, he had a gun on him legally, but there was no evidence for that whatsoever. He hadn't drawn his gun, hadn't attempted to draw his gun. This has all become highly charged and highly politicised, hasn't it?
No, absolutely. And it's one of those things where we've got to separate out a few things here. One of which is that, of course, when you have, as in America, armed police forces, armed ICE agents, and what have you, that horrible things happen. And because of the fact that the officers are armed, also the people they're coming into contact with are armed, the stakes are much higher than any interaction you would see between border officials or police and members of the public in this country, for instance. There's one thing that's worth checking. America periodically now will have these sorts of almost social media forensics rows, different angles over certain forms of police shootings. We're now seeing that kind of globalised, and even people in Britain looking into it. So it's worth saying that it's always worth waiting for full investigations to take place and for as much information to come out before one forms a view. Although, as you say, in this case, the more we learn, the more questionable it becomes. But at the same time, it's also clear that the fact that not only is the administration committed to deporting illegal migrants and to making clear that this is no longer going to be tolerated, the kind of shock and awe tactics to which they've tried to do that, partly to send a message as much as anything else, is going to produce more of these situations, regrettably, and it's also going to turn off a larger portion of the electorate. You're already seeing that in the polls. There's an uneasiness.
It's still got full. It still has more support, you know, than people opposed to it. But again, a lot of the theatre is now because of the protesters.
Yeah, well, of course.
The protesters are protesting a electorally mandated legal government power.
And that is the other side
voice, which, by the way, was something. I mean, we discussed on the show yesterday. Obama did exactly the same. They weren't objecting to it then. They're only objecting to it because it's Trump ordering it. Because he's a fascist and Obama was a good guy, so the policy was okay when he did it.
That is the other side of the equation. Absolutely, these people are often willfully putting themselves in harm's way when you try and disrupt what is a state agency fulfilling what they have been ordered to do, which has a pretty firm democratic mandate behind it. That is clearly raises questions on their side. At the same time, I think the administration would be careful not to allow this to essentially tar the whole enterprise.
Yeah,
because
I think the rowing back is a good idea.
A lot of people are looking to America as it being possible to do these things and to do it in a way that is humane and straightforward. If that starts to sour, that could have implications not just America.
I think humane, I think, is an overused word. I mean, it should be legal, but if you're in the country illegally and you commit a crime and they tell you to leave, you should, A, you shouldn't be in the country, B, you shouldn't commit the crime, C, you should leave. And if they have to go and send the heavies round to get you out, that's your fault. I'm sorry, that's your fault.
No, ultimately it does.
They've got guns because everyone else has got guns.
I'm not talking about asking them nicely, but I'm saying if it becomes associated with something which just looks, or
But I don't think a load of protesters like blowing whistles and screaming abuse, fascist and Nazi, at people carrying out their jobs. I mean, someone screamed abuse like that and screamed. I wish I had a gun. I'm not going to lie. I'm serious. I still think neither of these shootings had to happen, but I think both sides are at fault on both occasions. That's where I am. 10:27 is time. Still love to hear your thoughts on this. I just love to hear your thoughts on Suella Braverman in particular, her defection to reform. Question specifically I want to know your thoughts on is: are Tory defections good or bad for reform's appeal to voters? Love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. Plenty more to talk about, including the Prime Minister's trip to China and and again those crimes that just keep happening with a Pakistani asylum seeker, the latest illegal migrant to be convicted of rape. That thing that never happens just keeps on happening. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk. 10:30 is the time. Let's get a couple of your messages and some calls about, particularly on Suella Braverman and her move to reform. A lot of you getting in touch. Kuma saying it's ridiculous. How can they expect to reform anything when it's just more of the same old? These career politicians all of a sudden had a change of heart or what? Lily says, oh dear, not that waste of oxygen. We want to reform the country, not have Tory light in government. Vote reform, says Ash, get the Tories. Paul says it could be potentially good for reform's appeal. Says experience dealing with the blob is important. It really depends on the policies and strategy of the government. And Jeff says should be asked why she didn't stop the boats. Again, I don't think anyone could do any of these things unless they actually have the Prime Minister behind them to do it. But I'm not defending anybody. I'm just saying that's the reality. Government begins and ends with the PM. Let's go to Ian, who's on the line. 0344 499 1000. He's in London, wants to have his say. Ian, good morning to you. Are Tory defections like the latest from Suella Braverman, are they good or bad for reform's appeal to voters?
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning.
I'm afraid it's basically fatal. I've just left reform. I've sent my resignation letter in. The first meeting
you've resigned?
I've resigned. I used to be a old Labour, not this lot, old Labour. The first meeting, the inaugural, was 30 people.
Yeah.
30 people, and a lot of people, politically homeless, many ex-Labour. All the subsequent meetings in about 6. Because quite clearly the people who were talking were rabid Thatcherites. It was like Nick Mail, the New Statesman.
Rick Mail, yeah.
Or Tory boy, Harry Enfield.
Yeah.
And they said to us, I'm sure you're all Conservatives. Well, actually, no, 2/3 of us weren't.
That's and that's the thing about reform. It is it's got those red wall Labour seats. Effectively, it's to appeal to Brexiteers again. Working class. Labour voters, but it's also got, as you say, the right-wing Tories. It's very difficult when you grow beyond a certain size to be all things to all men.
No, not really. They sell themselves as country before party and the forgotten, the marginalised, ordinary white working class.
Yeah.
Well, it's a lie.
You think they're just Tories now?
Yes.
That's interesting, because there's quite a few people, I guess I have on the stone, but not sure, people I've known for many years who are on the left. And I've often said to them, either on air or off afterwards, we agree on a lot more than we disagree on. I think the centre ground of British politics, and I don't mean what, I don't know, some the so-called centre ground, the lefty Tories think is the centre ground, but centre ground of where most people are in this country. I think there's a huge amount of agreement. Can you not put up with a few, they'll put up with you put up with a few Tories, they'll put up with a few old Labour lefties, and you kind of muddle along together because you want the same things ultimately?
That's what I thought to begin with. Traditional Labour was Eurosceptic, no foreign wars, protect our borders, protect the ordinary white working class, and equality, and we're not having it.
OK, really, really interesting to hear your thoughts, Ian. Thank you very much. Another call from Patrick, who's in East Yorkshire. Patrick, what do you want to say? Is this good or bad for reform? And we've had a whole spate of Tories, largely actually from Boris Johnson's old cabinet and government.
Morning, Empress. Look, they're getting their knickers in a twist. I basically like a football team. If you've got a good goalkeeper, centre-half, midfield and striker, you build a team around that. They've got these experienced people in now. They have the backbone. But do you remember about 2 years ago when the other side said, "Oh, we're ready for government. We're ready to look after you. Yeah. We're ready for change." They weren't ready. It's all the set of muppets that's on the front row now. They couldn't run anything in a brewery, darling. They've absolutely no experience whatsoever. Yeah. Now, people come from teams all over the place and they change their minds and they look at the better teams. As long as I don't think they've done it to save their jobs. I think they've looked at their own party and think, where the hell are you going?
You think these are genuine, look, I'm going to the party that actually represents my views, in which case you're happy to have them?
As long as they toe the party line, Julia, I don't see an issue with it. I mean, you look at the passion of Suella Braverman yesterday. You could never see any passion like that from Starmer or Rachel Reeves without crying and things like that. It's ridiculous. Yep. Let's have a real good, solid base, build everybody around it, let's make a good government, then we can make decisions and they can advise. There is no senior statesman in the government at the moment who they can go to and say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that?
That's true. Patrick, great call. Thank you. Really big contrast between those two calls. Love to know where you stand. 0344 499 1000. I'll get the thoughts of my next guest in a few moments. He's the Conservative, still, former Security Minister Tom Tugendhat. Going to talk to him about the Prime Minister's trip to China and plenty more besides. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:37 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's go straight to my next guest. He's a Conservative MP, former Security Minister, Tom Tugendhat. A very good morning to you.
Julia, how are you? It's nice to see you.
Lovely to see you. I just want to check you're still a Conservative MP, not planning to be one of those who moves to reform?
Julia, no, you know me. I am
ask.
loyal to a fault, and I am staying loyal to the Conservative Party as I've always been loyal to the country.
Suella Braverman said that the Tories lacked courage and backbone, and basically, you know, she says she thinks she's come home to Reform Party. There'll be a lot of, we had two very, very different views from different callers this morning on this. But some will say, like, well, they don't want a bunch of old Tories, particularly, Boris Johnson's old government being putting the band back together. Others say, look, we need the experience. But others are saying, like, Reform is now the right-wing party in this country, not Conservatives. It's full of people like, your Ruth Davidsons, your Andy Streeters and their Prosper group, which is basically, it could be Lib Dem or Blair, couldn't it?
Well, first of all, I like Andy and I like Ruth. But
so do I.
They're not in the parliamentary party, and, they're welcome to have their own opinions on many things, and they've got free opinions. Now, you know this too, Julia. I happen to rather like, Suella as well. We worked together at the Home Office when I was the Security Minister. We got on very well. The problem is I agree with Suella, but historically, she's absolutely right that the Conservative Party on those days when, frankly, immigration ran away with us and, it was appalling, and you've heard my criticism of it, where, I didn't get quite all the laws through that I wanted to get through on national security. I got a big National Security Act through, but I didn't get as much through as I wanted. I would agree with her. The problem is I don't agree with her today because I can see that Kemi's turning that around. So I'm slightly, I don't want to be rude about any of my friends, and I certainly don't want to be rude about Suella, but I just feel that slightly historic criticism, that's all.
You see, yeah, she's out of date. The party's moved on and changed under Kemi Badenoch.
Yeah, I think it has. I really do. And I think, just look at the way that Kemi has grasped the nettle on ECHR. She's been absolutely clear on it. I started talking about it during the leadership, whenever it was, 18 months ago. In fact, I started talking about it for the first time in 2013. You very kindly covered it in 2015-16 when we were talking about lawfare and the problems of the ECHR and the battlefield. Yeah. But Kemi's made that absolutely clear. We've taken a lot of things on. And do you want to criticise the last, certainly the last 5 of the last 14 years? Yeah, fine. I get it, right? I completely understand. Not only do I understand, I share a lot of the criticism. But that's what Kemi's turning around, and that's what we've got to turn around to deliver, not just lower migration, but actually making sure that this country works again.
That would be a good start. Economic news is not looking good at the moment, but the Prime Minister is hoping, and he travels to China tonight, that he is going to be turning that around with trying to do some sort of trade deal with, the second biggest economy in the world. Never hear Keir, kowtow Keir. He's been called everything under the book. We've now got this revelation that under the Tories and who are we kidding? Probably right now as well. The Chinese have been spying on not just the Prime Minister's 3 in a row, and who knows this one, aides, but probably on the Prime Ministers themselves, telephones, and hacking those. How secure are we? And does the Prime Minister even need to go to China? Because, he's given them the Chinese embassy just across the road. He gives them everything they want. He's buying all of their, coal-fired factory-made solar panels, EV cars and everything else. What more do they want from him?
Well, look, Julia, that I have been warning about this for years. And, while I was Security Minister, we caught more spies, more Russian and Chinese spies than in the 20 years before, because we put the absolute focus on it. Is the truth that we caught all of them? Of course it isn't. And does it mean that it's gone away? Of course it hasn't. We know very well that everything from electric vehicles, which are, let's face it, just connected vehicles, as in they're connected to the internet, so they listen to absolutely everything that's going on in and around them, or whether it's about the hacking of phones, which is a bit harder, but, we know that the Chinese state has done it. We know that it's ongoing, and, we caught them a bit. I hope we're more secure today. We certainly set up procedures to be more secure.
I love you say hope.
I hope Labour are following them.
We hope we're more secure. I doubt very much that we are, though.
I can't tell you whether Labour's following the same procedures, that's all. That's why I'm saying that. The reality is that we do improve the technology as it goes.
But so do the Chinese.
Sorry?
So do the Chinese.
Yeah, but so do the... Look, you're absolutely right. what can I say? My own criticism is not so much on that, though I do find the defence that some people have given, about this embassy stuff, where some people have said, oh, well, everybody spies on everybody. Yeah, but it's our job to stop them spying on us. And in any way excusing it is completely wrong. So actually, I'm pretty hard line on that. But the trip to China, I just think it's a mistake. And let me tell you why it's a mistake. It's a mistake because he's not going to get much out of it. He might get a little bit of investment, but Rachel Reeves only got £120 million a year, which is less than many companies invest in the UK. It's pathetic, really. And what he's actually going to do is he's giving a big win to the Chinese emperor at the time when the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party is currently under a huge amount of pressure because of all the fights going on within the People's Liberation Army. And he's doing it without really getting anything in return. Where's Jimmy Lai? Still in prison. Yeah. Where's the where's the threats against our universities? Still happening. Where's the pressure on Hong Kongers in the United Kingdom? Still going on. What's he got for this?
But it is very interesting. You just said Chinese emperor, and it's the and it's the president. But yeah, he is an emperor.
Sorry, my mistake.
No, I think it was very accurate. It was very accurate. He has purged all of his possible challengers, even his childhood friend, the most senior military general. He is now in absolute control of China. He is, as someone described on the radio this morning, actually, Donald Trump may lead the biggest military, the biggest economy, but he is the single most powerful individual man because he doesn't stand for election, not real elections, and he has absolute power. He doesn't have to deal with a democratic Congress, or anything like, or a Supreme Court. There is a big danger of trying to sort of cozy up to a murderous, tyrannical regime, which means nothing but ill towards us. What don't they get about that?
Look, Julia, you're preaching to the choir. I have been warning about this since 2016, 17. I can't remember exactly when, but around then. Because it is completely obvious to me that the difference between China and other states. So look, you don't need me to tell you this, but I'm not a fan of Russia, I'm not a fan of Iran. But the difference with those two states and China is they are violent insurgents trying to beat around the edge of our area of trade and commerce and exchange. The difference with China is they're trying to break it down. What they're trying to do is they're trying to break down the system where we exchange goods and services between nations of equals into one that simply goes via Beijing. Yep. Now, that's not only bad for us, it's actually bad for China too, but they don't care because it doesn't matter what's good for China. It matters what's good for the Chinese Communist Party, not what's good for the Chinese people.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can see that by the falling demographics. You can see that by the prison camps. You can see it by the repression of minorities, including the Uyghurs who are in camps all over Xinjiang, or by the arrests of Hong Kongers in Hong Kong. It is all about the Communist Party. And that's what we're seeing.
Let me ask you finally about a Palestinian family who have been refused the right to settle in the UK because that would be, we're told, a step too far in risking national security. It's good to know there is actually a step too far. Family of 6 is taking legal action against the Home Office and the Foreign Office after being refused onward travel assurances which are necessary for them to leave Gaza. Lawyers for the government have said that it was UK policy not to allow foreign nationals into the country without biometric checks, etc., etc. And these checks cannot be carried out in Gaza, so they basically they'd have to go via Jordan, and they wouldn't be able to do this without this agreement from the British to let them arrive. This is a long-running legal action. Basically, they're trying to. Shabana Mahmood is, to all credit to her, is trying to restrict the ability of migrants to use the European Convention on Human Rights to come and live in the UK. But the point about this case is they're trying to use a scheme that was meant very specifically and quite categorically in the legislation for Ukrainian refugees to come here on a temporary basis, to open it up to basically anyone in Gaza who's got a rotten life there, which is literally everybody apart from the Hamas leaders, to come to this country. I mean, this is the right decision to keep these people out. I don't care whether they're kids or they're ill or they're students or whatever they are. We don't want these people here, do we?
No, look, this is completely the right decision. And let's be fair to her. Shabana Mahmood is defending our interests, which is exactly her job as Home Secretary. So I'm very pleased she's doing it. This started actually at the time of the Gaza operations in October the 7th, when we had many requests. And I do remember many people from the Foreign Office asking us to, just let them go without biometrics. And I'm afraid I was very clear on it. The answer is no. You do the biometrics. If you have to do them in Egypt, you do them in Egypt. But there's absolutely no way we're allowing onward travel to the UK.
I'm sorry, I forget the niceties. I don't want anyone from there. They are almost, to a man and a woman, utterly radicalised and a danger to us. One of the key things that's come out of these hostages, and we saw yesterday the final body of the final hostage seized on October the 7th returned to Israel by the IDF, by the way, not by Hamas as part of this deal. And the key thing is, everyone's pointed out, during what happened with the Nazis in Germany and in all across Europe, there are so many stories of good people doing the right thing to hide Jews, to save children. There is not one story out of Gaza, one story from one hostage who was taken, of any kindness or any help given by any Gazan. I'm sorry, I don't want these people anywhere near us.
Look, it's completely grim, and the reality is we need to be much tougher on our borders, and that's why, I go back to, when Suella was Home Secretary, I agree, things did get out of hand, and she's right to look back on those days and to feel sorry that the Conservative Party let them down, but,
Yep.
Who was Home Secretary?
It's a small point. Tom Tugendhat, always good to talk to you. We covered an awful lot of the world there. Conservative MP still continue to be, and former Security Minister. Tom Slater's also with us in the studio. Tom, where are you on any of these topics, really? I'll leave it to you to decide.
Well, I think just coming back to the question of China, it's so clear that the reason that Keir Starmer has decided to go to Beijing, the same way that Mark Carney, Canada's Prime Minister, recently struck a new trade deal, a new accord with the Chinese Communist Party, is from a position of kind of relative weakness. There's a sense that economically there's not a lot of ideas as to how to generate prosperity domestically, and certainly doesn't want to go near any of the net zero rules that might actually help things tick over a bit better. And so there's this hope that some inward investment or some more trade will come riding to the rescue. So I think it's just a reminder that the more exposed you are economically, militarily, whatever, obviously, it sounds so obvious, but it's worth re-saying, the weaker you are in this era of great power conflict.
Yep.
The penny hasn't even
All
dropped
the obvious
yet,
things need to keep being said again and again, because they don't seem to be obvious to the people in charge anymore. 10:49 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to talk about the latest on, our mad, terrible economic news, although we're told, it's finally going to be some help, bailout for pubs, but also winning £12,000 at an employment tribunal because you have rejection sensitivity. But don't we all have that? We'll talk to Michael Simmons of The Spectator up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:51 is the time. Delighted to welcome Michael Simmons to the show. He's economics editor at The Spectator. Good morning to you, Michael.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's talk about pubs. We're either in a pub or we're talking about pubs on this show. Usual rules. But what sounds like it's going to be some good news later today from the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, in terms of a bailout for pubs worth 300 million quid. What does it involve, and is that enough?
Yeah, well, it's probably not enough, but it's a step in the right direction. And the issue here is around the business rates that pubs and any businesses pay. And that rate that you pay, that tax, it's kind of like the business version of a council tax, is calculated based on various things, including the rent that you might pay for that building. And there's two issues that have happened at the same time here. One is that they were last calculated during lockdowns when things were cheaper. So they've had this kind of uprating, but also there was this COVID relief that was phased out. And it meant that some businesses were facing, over 100% increases. Some pubs were facing over 100% increases.
We're talking tens of thousands of pounds more.
Yeah,
just to be found out of thin air.
Yeah, absolutely. That they would just have to squeeze out of the very little profits that they make, more likely from having to cut staff. And when you add it to the national insurance increases they've got, the minimum wage increases they've got, many pubs are saying we simply are just going to go out of business. So there's going to be some kind of relief today so that those rates don't go up as much, or perhaps the relief.
But again, as always with these things, it's only temporary, so we're going to be facing the same again. I discovered the other day that apparently the pubs that show football, which is a really big part, like getting people into the pub, and they don't pay the same rate as we would pay to get, you know, the Sky package for the footy. You know, they have rate because, you know, they're going to have a load of people watching it. But the rate they pay is based on their business rates. So when their business rates go up, all these other costs go up as well.
Well, exactly. It just adds to everything. And it's interesting, you make the point about how this is temporary. I wonder if this will become something like we have with the fuel duty freeze, where every budget they say the fuel duty is, you know, about to be unfrozen, but it becomes politically impossible.
Yeah, it's impossible to do it. I just love the fact that when we spoke to the guy who started the campaign the other week, you know, this you know, banning Labour MPs from pubs. I think that is probably one of the most genius campaigns that would actually, if you want to change the world, ban your local MP from the pub, and that will actually focus minds. But of course, there are some pubs they won't be able to be banned from because they won't exist anymore. We've seen numerous pubs going under, but the Revel collection, they said the Revolution bars, the Reveille bars, the beach pubs, they are looking at collapsing. 3,000 jobs at risk. I keep saying this about hospitality. When hospitality loses jobs, if it was a steelworks, if it was somewhere in one place and everyone's going, that warehouse or that factory is losing this many jobs, everyone would be up in arms. The government would be there with a bailout to help them out. But because these are jobs that, you know, 20 here, 100 there, 30 there, it's across the country. We don't see it as the same sort of dire need, but we're looking at, you know, so many jobs going.
And pubs are crucial to our culture. And by the way, I think we should be clear here. The reason pubs are going to get this relief is because pubs are quite good at organising and campaigning. But other hospitality businesses, you know, cafes,
restaurants,
small restaurants and stuff are going to be having the same problems, but maybe don't have that same lobbying voice. But I think if you speak to people that own pubs, certainly, you know, not big brewery chains, but like the independent ones, they don't want to run as charities. You know, they can run as a business as long as the state does not create this environment where labour costs are so high, energy costs are so high, taxes are so high that it just becomes unprofitable.
I mean, they don't want to, exactly, no one's looking for a handout. It's not a subsidy. It's like, you can only tax, I mean, the business rate is a tax, you know, all the VAT, all the cost of most of the cost of a pint of beer or a glass of wine is tax in this country. And I think we're all amazed when we go to Europe and you go, how much for a glass of wine or a pint of beer? Like, what? You know, these are choices that the government makes, and it has a big impact. Let's hope that none of these publicans who are looking at, you know, possibly going under are suffering from rejection sensitivity, shall we? Because this is an extraordinary story. There's this woman, Sophie Stone, a neurodivergent events freelancer, apparently. She's been awarded £12,000 at a tribunal after complaining that her boss told her to stop thinking outside the box. Get back in your box. Apparently, she'd asked... She was invited to she works from home most of the time. You have to turn up once a month. There was a work summer party, and she asked if there would be a breakout area at the work summer party in case she got overwhelmed. Already at this point, I've lost the will to live. And apparently, the comment saying, well, stop thinking outside the box. There was something about she and a mate were going to be able to sit in someone's car if they were overwhelmed. I mean, for the love of God. But apparently this violated her human right to respect because she was being instructed to act neurotypical and not to rock the boat. She's won 12 grand, basically, for disability, harassment and victimisation. I mean, we don't stand a chance as an economy, do we? We don't stand a chance, Michael.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is just unbelievable nonsense. Like, I mean, rejection sensitivity. I think I have that. Isn't that, you know, nobody? That's just part of the human condition. It shouldn't stop you doing your job. And all I can say is, thank goodness that the day one right to sue your employer was removed from the workers' rights bill, or the employment rights bill that's coming through, because otherwise we'd be seeing, you know, people doing this literally in the first week, within the first hour of their job. They would have been able to sue their employer for comments like this.
And
as you
so
say,
many employers, they pay up.
Yeah,
I know people who they've been accused of various things. They go, you know, everyone knows it costs you, you know, £5,000 payout or whatever it is, and it will save you 10 grand in legal fees. And I know a number of small employers have gone, I don't care.
Yeah, and
I'm going to fight it on principle.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the real sad thing about this story is there will be plenty of people that do have autism or mental health conditions who actually do just want to go to work and do a good job. But people like this who take these spurious cases will just make employers think, you know, they'll never admit this because it'd be illegal, but they'll think, I'm not going to take a chance.
Of course they're not. They're not insane. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's just, but this is the crazy thing. If you don't, you know, if you're gonna struggle with going to the Christmas party or the summer party, don't go to the summer party, and no one's going to force you to go to the summer party.
Yeah,
if that's it, I mean, I'm sorry, but again, it's just like, you know, apparently because of her neurodivergent thinking, which affects her ability to process information, apparently she takes 4 hours to do a job that would take a colleague 2 hours. Well, I mean, again, so what? I mean, would we have that on this show? Like, okay, well, 2 hours before the show, you're not going to have anything ready until midday. What? And I'm supposed to go, oh, well, that's fine. We'll just hold off the show. Everyone will just wait. So I'll just wait another hour. I mean, I'm sorry, employers are allowed to say, I need someone who can do the job. It's mind-blowing. I think, frankly, with all due respect, they're probably well rid of her. But there you are, Sophie. We have just got to stop this namby-pambying ridiculous. This is not about helping someone with a disability. This is literally national economic suicide. Anyway, I'm going to reject you now. Don't get too oversensitive about it. Michael Simmons, economics editor at The Spectator. I'd love to get Tom's thoughts on that in just a few moments. Tom Slater. Lots more coming up, lots more top guests, lots more to talk about. Still want to get more of your calls on about Suella Braverman moving to reform. Is that good for reform or bad for reform? We've had a number of calls saying completely opposite things. What are your thoughts? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
very, very good morning to you. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is absolutely fabulous to have your company today. Still joining me, delighted to say, is editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater. We're going to switch things around a little bit in this next half hour, though. Normally we have a long chat, you and me, but first up we're going to have a guest we're going to be talking to. Rather relevant to the biggest story on the front page today, Suella Braverman, former Tory Home Secretary, being the latest MP to defect to reform. Also going to be talking about the Pakistani asylum seeker who's been found guilty of raping a woman in a Nottinghamshire park. I mean, again, that thing that never happens keeps on happening. And 50 Labour MPs signing a letter protesting the decision to block Andy Burnham from standing in the Gorton and Denton by-election. But we're going to get an announcement about who the reform candidate is going to be just after I come off air today. Tom Slater, before we go to our next guest, just in the question we're putting to our audience today, Suella Braverman being the latest Tory defector to reform, are Tory defectors good or bad for reform's appeal to voters? And tell us why. I'm asking people to give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged the national rate. Text costs £1. Standard network rate message. We had two callers in the last hour. One, I'm resigning my membership of reform, and the other, like, no, we need the experience. We need people who know how to fight the blob. Where are you standing on that?
I think are Tory defectors good or bad or for reform depends on which Tory defector you're talking about. So I think what we've seen...
got the...
No, exactly.
We're
both battling against terrible semi-colds at this point. But it's really quite simple. If you are bringing people on board who will add to the stature of the party, who are ideologically on board, who have some skills to bear, I don't think anyone's going to suggest that it's a net negative. Obviously, Reform wants to position itself as anti-establishment, anti-the uniparty, smashing up the system. But every time that you've had a challenge to the party duopoly, it has involved MPs moving from one party to another. It humiliates the party that you're trying to displace in the form of the Conservatives, and that certainly worked. So I get that there would be a danger if it did just look entirely like the Tory party rebranded. But when you think about when it comes to the next election, standing in every seat in the country, this is going to still feel, and one would expect to feel, like a very different political animal, even with these Tories on board. Very
interesting. Right, well, don't forget to get your calls in. I want to hear your thoughts after we speak to Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, of course. A very good morning to you, Richard.
Morning, Julia.
Another day when Reform are setting the agenda. Labour want to have this big announcement about police reform, barely made any of the front pages. No one really interested. Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, defecting to Reform. Just want to ask you the question, I'm guessing I could know the answer for this, whether defections are good or bad from the Tory party for Reform's appeal, because we did have a call a little bit earlier. Ian, he said, look, he's ex-Labour. He says this is just a bunch of ex-Tories and he's resigned his Reform membership. This isn't what he signed up to. What would you say to that?
Well, I'm sorry to hear that from Ian, but I would say if you look at the key leadership of Reform, we are different, we are disruptors, we're challenging the status quo, and in a sense, anybody who's come to Reform has come from a different place. They've either come from the Labour Party, they've come from no party at all, or they've come from the Conservative Party, because we're so new. That's the reality. On the one hand, we get criticism because we've got no experience to run anything. Well, if we do something about that, then we're sort of, we can't win whichever way we go. And so I would just respectfully say to people, we're starting to run councils, and I'm the head of that. We're making some significant savings. We're challenging a lot of the status quo things. So to Ian and others who are worried about it, just look at our track record over the next 12 months. Got plenty of time before a general election, whether we like it or not, and see what we deliver, see what the policies we come up with. And then ultimately, when you lend any party your vote at a general election, it is a loan. And it's based on who do you trust to be the most likely to actually carry out what they say. And we know that the Conservatives have a long track record of talking the talk and never delivering anything. That's why, in a sense, that's why we've emerged. And we've got a Labour Party that is, whatever it is, 18 months into a pretty disastrous start to their tenure. And they're now sort of third in the polls, in danger of in danger of losing to Zach Polansky, which is a pretty extraordinary feat.
We'll come to the Gorton by-election, but I mean, it's interesting because, you know, it's all been Tory defectors lately. I mean, it's been pointed out, you're putting Boris Johnson's band back together here. We've got his old Chancellor, Nadeem Zahawi, his old Communities Secretary, Robert Jenrick, who went on to work in the Home Office. We've got his old Culture Secretary, Nadine Dorries, his old Attorney General, went on to be Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, his old Political Secretary, Danny Kruger. You've got his old Skills Minister, Andrea Jenkins, his old Northern Powerhouse Minister, Jake Berry, his old Health Minister, Maria Caulfield, his 3 other members of his government as well, including his Principal Private Secretary. I mean, a lot of people wanted, you know, believed in reform, and including, I think, your party leader, Nigel Farage, was because of the betrayal by Boris Johnson after Brexit. I mean, Nigel Farage always felt it wasn't the right Brexit deal. I'm thinking, could we have got any better given the absolute betrayal of the negotiations by Theresa May and the giveaways that already happened? But in terms of immigration, the welfare spending, tax, the lockdown policies, I mean, if people are angry at Boris Johnson and they've helped be a part of reform, what's the point of voting for a party that's got a whole load of old Boris Johnson acolytes?
It's very simple. I would just say to people, listen to Suella's speech yesterday at the press conference, and she and a number of others, they've recognised and admitted the failures. Suella spoke powerfully about her inability to get Rishi Sunak to do what needed to be done. And guess what? She got fired. Robert Jenrick resigned on a matter of principle, because Boris and subsequent prime ministers were not doing what needed to be done. So I actually think it's a strength in life to recognise when one's got something wrong, to learn from it, admit it, and then say, I'm going to change things in the future.
Okay.
We need that blend of experience. I would just politely point out, we have got 270,000 members, and some of that list that you read out have no intention of being MPs again, for example.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. I mean, I've got a lot of your income's now coming from those membership fees, isn't it? Far bigger than other parties. Where's that Labour defect we were hearing so much about? I've asked around.
You're so impatient.
Well, I mean, because
you're so impatient,
Nigel Farage said 2 weeks ago it would be last week. Then, OK, it was a busy news week. We were expecting we get an announcement about yet another reform press conference. We all thought it would be happening now. When he was asked about it at the press conference last night, Nigel Farage said, well, you know, it's not quite over the line yet. In fact, he made the point that, you know, he'd been helped by Kemi Badenoch sacking Robert Jenrick, because it doesn't. I'm thinking that wasn't quite over the line until Kemi Badenoch pushed it over the line. So, have you got a big name Labour defector or not?
Just patience is a virtue.
That's a
Everything
not.
in good
time. The answer
time.
is you don't have one.
No, that is not the answer.
But you need
Julia.
to have the balance, don't you? If you are to be all things to all men.
Don't be so impatient. You know, we can't.
Nigel Farage
set
the timeline. Next week, he said 2 weeks ago, we're going to have a Labour defector.
Yeah, and it might be the following week. In the scheme of a 200-week process towards the next general election, it actually doesn't matter whether it's next week or the week after. There is a process to go on. OK,
week's a long time in politics. We're looking at likely just exactly a month to the Gorton by-election, though, in Manchester. Now, Andy Burnham blocked from standing in that seat. Now it's looking like Labour are going to lose that seat. Now, a lot of people are saying it would be to reform. You're announcing your candidate this afternoon. Do you want to give us a little tidbit about who that's going to be?
Yeah, listen in at about 2:15.
Too late for my show. Come on, Richard.
Yeah, but
listen, it's just between friends. You, me, everyone else. Everyone agrees. No one say a word. Shh. Who is it? Come on.
You've got to keep listening to talk throughout the afternoon so that you can hear. That's the key thing. But what I will say is that by-election will be a referendum on Keir Starmer's tenure in Number 10, and there's every chance that Labour will come third. It'll be close. It won't be easy for anybody. It'll be closely fought. They're rushing it through because they're absolutely terrified. They're frit. But we are going to be announcing a great candidate, and we're very, very enthusiastic.
OK, now, we know that the Greens are going to fight this. Not Zach Polansky himself, we are told. But
yeah, he's bottled it.
Muslim Vote, an organisation set up to basically push, let's face it, let's be honest, sectarian voting, who backed some of the Gaza MPs who are currently in Parliament right now, who apparently put the interests of people in Gaza over and above those of the British people they're supposedly supposed to represent their constituencies. They said they are going to back a Green candidate, pretty much whoever it is. Some think it might might be the Green Party deputy leader, Mrs. Mohsin Ali, who's already caused a bit of a stir with some of his previous comments. But with 28% of the population in Gorton and Barton as Muslim, this is going to be a battle for the Muslim vote. We are talking once again sectarian voting on the British mainland. What do you make of that?
Well, that's what's the consequence of opening the doors to mass, cheap, low-skilled immigration from countries very often who don't share our culture and our values. And that's the consequence. You end up with sectarian politics. But actually, I think it'll be a fascinating by-election. And I think also the Workers' Party might well be standing, which would split that vote. And
this
then
is
also
George Galloway.
Which is George Galloway's party. And then you got the interesting thing is actually because, a lot of people of a lot of Muslims do not approve of the sort of pro-trans agenda that the likes of Zach Polanski approve of, and various other people at the head of the Green Party. So they may well be quite turned off by that offering and look to the Workers' Party. So it's going to be a very, very interesting electoral battle, and we're very excited on it. It's a short, sharp, energetic campaign, and you'll have to follow it day in, day out, Julia.
Oh, good Lord. do we? Let's talk about what's going on in America. You're Nigel Farage's big mate, Donald Trump. He seems to sort of rode back a little on some of his ICE deportation. The manpower as opposed to the policy, after we've seen a second protester shot dead by ICE agents in Minneapolis in just a matter of weeks. Look, the ins and outs of those particular cases, there's no doubt at all the likes of the Homeland Security boss and the senior ICE border commander on the ground, basically instantly defending the ICE agents at the time, accusing the protesters in most occasions of being terrorists intent on murder and the like. That has caused a massive outcry. You are planning, if you're elected, to have deportations of, just like Donald Trump, with, I think, the full support of the British people, of anyone who's sane, of foreign criminals who are illegally here in this country. How do you propose to do that, even if Donald Trump is facing the difficulties he's facing in America with the support he's got?
Well, we do things differently in Britain. We do it the British way. And our police on the streets, they don't carry guns. We're not a gun-carrying, gun-toting nation as a rule, and thank heavens for that. So we would do it differently, but it does, as you say, come with I think, the full support of the majority of the British people. And you've therefore got to be robust about it in the right processes, with the right numbers of enforcement agents, police, border force, in order to be able to identify, find and pick up and detain and remove and deport those who are here illegally. And you've got to avoid the situation that we saw in Scotland about a year or so ago, which was a sort of Scottish equivalent of what you're seeing in parts of America, where people want immigration control, but then some of the soft lefty lovies don't like it when actually an illegal is found and tried to be deported. You can't have it both ways. You either want to remove illegals or you don't. It's as simple as that.
I still find it utterly incomprehensible that anyone thinks that people who are here illegally, have arrived illegally or overstayed, should be in the country. I'm utterly flabbergasted by anyone thinking that's a controversial or right-wing view. But of course, we have a lot of talk about Donald Trump, and the Republicans being fascists, being Nazis, the ICE agents accused of that. We can already see a lot of that language here in the UK. We were discussing this on the show yesterday, where we've got we've even had Priti Patel. I mean, I was really surprised by this, talking about how your economic policies are national socialist, which is national socialists were the Nazis, of course. Other luminaries on the left routinely referring to you guys as far right or fascist, likening you to the Nazis, setting up that agenda where, well, basically, even a violent response to anything you did do if you were in office would be justified because you were fascists or Nazis. Are you alarmed by that?
I think what I'm sad by is that you get that sort of desperate lashing out by a dame of the nation. I mean, what Pretty said on Sunday is just unbecoming of a dame. Let's just leave it at that. I'm sure she regrets it. It was like what her chairman said. This is, but in a sense, let's not forget that yesterday was the launch of Prosper UK, which was a bunch of sort of centrist, failed Tories who don't recognise the damage that they've inflicted on the nation over the last 15 years, whether it's the likes of Gavin Barwell and multiple others. That's the way the Tory party is going, and the existing parliamentary Tory party is sort of floundering. But over half of them really would be more at home under the umbrella of Ed Davey and the Lib Dems, I think.
Certainly. Can I ask you also about, this is a case actually, Lee Anderson, one of your MPs, actually was raised, and he was the one who was told, you're not allowed to talk about this, but he made it public on the basis he didn't view that it would actually in any way affect the outcome of the trial. I think quite rightly. But this is an asylum seeker, smuggled in the back of a lorry, living here illegally. This is Shiraz Malik. He was unmasked, as say, by Lee Anderson. He has been convicted of raping a vulnerable 18-year-old girl. He pounced on in her park. He and a friend, raped her, dragged her into the park. She was messaging, a friend in between, help me, help me. An extraordinary case, and again, yet another case of a young man in this country illegally who has committed a crime against a young woman or a girl in this country. We keep being told that when we talk about this, we are bigoted and racist and xenophobic. But these crimes keep on happening, don't they?
And the truth is, we are mums and dads who are terrified for our daughters. That is the bottom line. And that is why you're seeing protests week in, week out in leafy Crowborough, in Sussex, and in many other parts of the country. The British people have had enough. They are sick and tired of being gaslit, being demonised, being smeared, being labelled with all this stuff. And it's interesting, isn't it? Reform has led in the last 200 plus national polls by an average of 8, 9, 10%. And all of this nonsense is just, it's water off a duck's back. Fundamentally, if you allow people to invade your country illegally and then to come after our women and girls, don't be surprised if people get at best grumpy, at worst very, very angry.
Just finally, the Spanish government has said they're going to grant citizenship to 500,000 migrants in the country who are there illegally. They say they're going to be there anyway. They may as well give them legal status if they've been in the country since only before, interestingly, the beginning of this year, have no criminal record and can prove 5 months of uninterrupted residence in the country before that time. Basically, if you can get to Spain, you're going to basically be given legal status to remain in Spain. 500,000 people. Your response to that?
Well, if they would like some, then we could probably give them 500,000 from the UK and do some form of deal. It's called the magnet factor. And the moment you grant any form of amnesty, immunity like that, then you are just opening the borders to more criminality, more illegality. And frankly, they need their heads looking at.
Thank you very much, Richard Tice, the Deputy Leader of Reform UK. Thank you very much indeed. As you said, stay tuned to talk for the rest of the day, of course, because you should always, because we'll be hearing who that Reform candidate is going to be. Tom Slater, listening to all of that, editor of Spiked Online, what do you want to come back on?
Well, I think it's just so clear. Still can't clear my throat, can I?
Sorry.
It's so clear that I cannot clear my throat, is the issue. That illegal migration in particular, but migration in general, is like the defining political issue of our time. It cuts across everything we've been talking about, whether it's ICE in the US, whether it's the rise of reform here,
the economy,
whether it's what Pedro Sanchez's socialists in Spain are mulling over doing, which sounds absolutely crazy. And it's the party who can come up with a kind of credible offer on all of that, which commands popular support, but also seems like they're capable of executing it.
Competence is going to be crucial.
Who the political future belongs to. Populism plus a plan. I think that's where the future
populism,
lies
again, still a word that gets a really bad name. Populism, doing things that the people want. Mad idea in a democracy.
We used to call it a democracy. No, it's called populism. But it's not.
Because you've got to remember, again, all the people on the so-called centrists, what they mean is, we're in charge. We know better than you. Shh. shh, you don't understand. We're the clever people. We know better than you. That is genuinely what they think. The reason I know this, A, a lot of them say it quite out loud, but B, they often think, because I also went to university with a lot of them and things like that, and that, you know, I live among them, they're like, but they actually say to me, but you can't believe the things you say. You're one of us. And I'm like, oh, you're terrifying. I'm not one of you. I do believe every single word I say, as you know, you can vouch for.
No, exactly.
These
people never say that to me. They just presume I'm scum.
No, but it's absolutely fascinating. But it's when they, and again, that I told you, a really, really well-known media person saying to me years back, you couldn't, how on earth, you can't really be a Brexiteer. He said, you're educated. Actually said that to me. The mask slips. I'm just saying, this is the whole thing. When they use the word populist, what they mean is ghastly, ordinary people having their say. They're quite happy for someone to come and clean their house, quite happy for someone to drive their cab, and they'll occasionally quote them when they're on Sky News on the BBC. Oh, my cab driver said, you know those people, they do. I spoke to a working class person, but they fundamentally think the rest of us are scum. They really, really do. You don't hate these people enough. You really don't. 11:23 is the time. I'm going to get more thoughts from Tom and from you. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000 on anything we're talking about. But in particular, are Tory defections like that of Suella Braverman, after Robert Jenrick and everybody else, are they good or bad for Reform's appeal to voters? And tell us why. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:27 is the time. Let's get to more of your calls, and let's get to more Tom's latest thoughts on all the big stories. Let's go to Kevin first. He's in Portsmouth. Kevin, you want to have your say on whether or not Suella Braverman and all these Tory defections is good for reform or not good for reform. What do you make of it?
Good morning, Julia. I'm only going to comment on, first of all, Suella Braverman is going to be fantastic for reform. Now, I stood against her in Fareham and Waterloo in the last election.
As a reform candidate?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
In her acceptance speech, it was absolutely fantastic because she admitted we got a lot of things wrong. Mm-hmm. We got a lot of stuff to fix. Nobody else did, but she did. At the count, in front of the press, in front of all the various parties and everybody else. She was very cross that I was standing because she saw me as taking a chunk of her votes away, which I did. But she won, and I was pleased she won because she's a very, very good constituency MP. She's very knowledgeable, but above all, she has always been utterly consistent in terms of law and order, in terms of dealing with illegal immigration, in terms of properly leaving the EU, ECHR and everything else. And she's been entirely consistent. Some of the others haven't.
Yes. I mean, certainly Robert Jenrick, should we say, I think the euphemism is, he's been on a journey.
Well, I would say he's very flexible.
But I agree with you. Suella Braverman has absolutely been very consistent with this. What do you say?
Straight.
What do you say to people who say, "Well, fine, she talked the talk, but when she was Home Secretary, she didn't deliver on the key things that people said." No. What would you say to that?
Right. So, when she was castigating me for standing and upsetting her future job prospects, I said, the only reason I'm here, and this is absolutely God's honest truth, and if you ever get her on, you can ask her. So the only reason I'm here is because your party, not you, but your party has absolutely failed the British people. It was elected to do a number of jobs, and it's failed on every single one. Yeah. And it's betrayed the British people. It doesn't apply to you personally, but it does apply to your party. And look what's happening. All the wets and
what
the
was her response?
Behind. Not a lot, because of course she was standing as a Tory.
Yeah,
and so therefore there's a limit. There's a limit to what she's going to say to the enemy, which is fair enough.
But we know, I mean, it's been well documented, both publicly and privately, that she's been very unhappy with Tory failures on these issues. What do you say to a caller a little bit earlier, Ian, who said he's from Labour, he's resigned his Reform membership, like all these Tories coming over, it's just becoming a Tory party, number two?
So, I think that's unfortunate. I'm not sure it's a very wise move, because a lot of the people coming over are bringing experience. Some of them I would want to keep a very close eye on, extremely close eye on, because some of them are a little bit shaky on certain beliefs and core issues.
Okay.
But no, I mean, one does have to have experience if you're operating at governmental and council level, because they do things differently. Having said that, sometimes it's quite good to have people coming in with no experience. They take one look at it and think, "What the hell would you think you're doing?"
Accepting that this is how we do things.
Away.
Yeah, and that's where Zia Yusuf comes in. I think it's really good stuff. Yeah. Kevin, really interesting to speak to you today. Thank you very much for that call. Tom Slater, just here's another thing. Andy Burnham, totally the big news over the weekend here in the UK, certainly. A lot of people say, we should be talking more about ICE shooting in America. But, we did cover that. But at the end of the day, who might be our next Prime Minister? Rather relevant to us as British voters, isn't it? But it is interesting, this Suella Braverman defection, although it damages the Tories and it helps reform, I would say absolutely, on balance, it really does help them. I think she's very credible. By the way, Suella Braverman, we have established with unusable date, it is Braverman, not Braverman. We have established that during the show. Yeah,
I can only apologise.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Nigel Farage called her both yesterday, but I've been bidding for her. Please, come on the show. We want to hear from you, Suella. You are always welcome on the show.
Julie will definitely pronounce your name properly.
I will definitely pronounce your name properly. Come on, that surely that's worth something. But it's basically this helped Keir Starmer, didn't it? Although we've got the stories about these 50 Labour backbenchers who've written to the Prime Minister urging him to backtrack and to allow Andy Burnham to stand as the candidate. It's not going to happen. We know that. I mean, that's the one U-turn he's probably not going to stand on. I think for him, for the party, I think he probably did make the right decision, interestingly, although it was basically for him that he did it. But actually, this would still be all over the front pages if it wasn't for Suella Braverman knocking him off. Didn't Nigel Farage do Keir Starmer a favour?
In a sense, he did, absolutely, because going into Monday, we all thought that the story of the day was going to be Andy Burnham, was going to be the backlash. You remember on Sunday, there was talk of this is civil war. This is going to rip the party apart. I think that was probably a little bit overheated, but nevertheless, as you say, that was set to dominate the news on Monday. This defection completely takes the air out of that. That being said, those problems aren't going away. And I think it's just the case that the story of British politics now is swinging between the question of, is Reform and Nigel Farage going to mount an upset here, and when is Keir Starmer going to crumble? That's the kind of constant to and fro of what we're talking about and what we're discussing.
Is this an element where Nigel Farage would be very happy to be facing Keir Starmer Labour leadership rather than Andy Burnham?
That's the thing. I mean, if Andy Burnham is seen off, if West Streeting is put back in his box, the primary beneficiary of that will be Nigel Farage. And also, essentially how the next election is framed, it's become a bit pat, but I think there's some truth to it, that the strongest way in which, for Reform, that the next election will play out is if it becomes a referendum on Keir Starmer, who is someone who is genuinely the most unpopular Prime Minister this quickly who was ever held the office.
He doesn't like democracy. We know that. Whether it's the local elections, 4.5 million people are going to be allowed to basically banned from having their vote. Local councils, 29 of them, mostly Labour, are going to be allowed to not hold elections. We know, he doesn't want, to let any candidate stand in an election. I mean, maybe he's going to get some tips off Xi Jinping in China while he's there.
No, exactly. He loves a purge as well, doesn't he?
He does love a purge.
That's the one thing you can say about Keir Starmer, is that his desire to exert control over the Labour Party as soon as he got into post has been genuinely defining.
Got rid of the Corbyns.
Got rid of the Corbynites, was very robust in getting rid of Andy Burnham. I mean, the image of him sat on the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party himself, arguing for why Andy Burnham should be pushed out. I mean, on one hand, you could say he's got the ruthlessness, but also what a position of weakness that you're having to do that. So it's yes.
I think it's fascinating. He felt he needed to be there
to set the tone.
You're not busy. I mean, reading some notes about China. I mean, prepping on anything, running the country might have been useful. The
thing that we've got to bear in mind here is that survival is the only game in town for this Labour government now, and for Keir Starmer in particular. Everything else is secondary to that. Hence the U-turns, hence all kinds of things going wrong. Everything is about narrow survival.
He just wanted to be Prime Minister, wanted to be Labour leader, and then wanted to be Prime Minister, and didn't really have an idea of what he wanted to do it for. I was like, why? Everyone wants to be. I'd love to be Prime Minister. I mean, I'd be rubbish. I'd be rubbish at it. Yeah. But I don't have those. I don't have those management skills.
They're all like that. Andy Burnham is just that in genes, and Wes Streeting is just that with a pulse. I mean, really, to be perfectly
with a
frank.
sense of humour.
And a sense of humour. Yeah. So they've got the bench is not particularly deep where Labour are concerned, and that's something
Andy
which
Burnham
is helping.
Is just Keir Starmer in jeans.
Listening to Radio 6 music. That's all it is.
Oh, I love it. 11, nailed it. 11:35 is the time. Up next, going to talk, put that to former Labour Party staffer and now Chief Exec of the Northern Powerhouse Partnership, Henry Murison, about that Labour civil war. Is he in civil war? Does any of it matter? We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:36 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just discussing politicians in their little outfits now with Tom Slater. I won't go into too much of the detail, but I do think that I'm thinking there's Andy. It's not just Andy Burnham. It isn't just Keir Starmer in jeans. Andy Burnham is just Keir Starmer in a bomber jacket.
Keir Starmer in a bomber jacket. Keir Starmer with shaped eyebrows.
Ministry of Sound.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all it is. Anyway, let's go to my next guest. Let's talk about where we are with Andy Burnham and his chances of getting back into Parliament and challenging the Prime Minister, which is clearly what he wants to do. And it's clearly what the Prime Minister has tried to stop him from doing by stopping him from running in the Gorton and Barton by-election. Well, let's talk about this with Henry Murison. He's a former Labour Party staffer. He's now Chief Executive of the Northern Powerhouse Partnership. A very good morning to you, Henry.
Good morning, Julia. Lovely to join.
Lovely to talk to you. Now, just explain to me the Northern Powerhouse Partnership. I mean, you've had to do a lot of work, I imagine, with Andy Burnham and other Northern mayors.
So I've been very lucky to work with Andy since he was first elected. And I think, obviously, through the prism of Westminster politics, Andy coming back to Westminster is all about what happens to Keir Starmer. Obviously, up here, very selfishly, we'd be quite sad to lose Andy.
You want to keep him as mayor. He's a very popular mayor. Although, interestingly, there's been quite a few papers pointing out that, if you actually look at this sort of wonderful, amazing growth that Manchester has seen, I know, a lot of youngsters who've headed off to Manchester for uni, and they all say, oh, it's party town. I mean, much more fun and lively in the nighttime, economy than in London these days, where everyone's sort of gone home at 8:30 p.m. But actually, a lot of this is kind of illusory, and it's not doing quite as well as he's saying it is.
So I'm glad you booked me, because I can give you a very nerdy reason why the vibe is met by the economic reality. So if you
very briefly, Henry.
Yeah, I'll keep it quick. If you look back at the productivity data for the last 20 years, Greater Manchester has been growing in productivity terms faster than any other city region in the country. So yeah, London's still more productive because all of our sort of other city regions in the country are kind of below national average often, which is very unusual around Europe. But we're closing that gap quite quickly. And I think what I would say about Andy's legacy is he obviously, when he was in government, wasn't known for doing big economic jobs. He was largely spending departments. But actually, since he became mayor, he has embraced the kind of economic agenda, which ironically, as a Westminster politician, he never really did. So I think Manchester hasn't just been changed by Andy. I think it's fair to say that being mayor's changed Andy quite a bit, and he now understands the relationship. That if you want to make people more prosperous, if you want to deal with poverty, you've got to generate more economic value in the first place.
But he's also said he doesn't think that the country or the party should be in hock to the bond markets. And every time he says something like that, anytime he looks close to him sort of getting a chance to run for the leadership, the bond markets immediately go, oops, because the reality is we are in hock to the bond markets. We owe them an absolute fortune. That is how we fund everything. And unless he's going to put the taxes up on everybody, all the things that he leading, and it would be, if it was Angela Rayner and Ed Miliband in his cabinet, we're looking at a more left-wing cabinet. That's a spending cabinet. You can say you're going to fund everything from taxing the wealthy and borrowing more as much as you want. A, you won't be able to borrow anymore. We're up to the limit. And B, there won't be any wealthy people left to tax. So, he can talk a good game, but he clearly doesn't understand basically economics 101.
I think you make a good argument, Julia, about the nature of what unites sensible, pragmatic politicians. So if you look at the difference between my old boss, George Osborne, who set up my organisation, and Rachel Reeves, the current Chancellor, what they agree about is the fact that the principal objective is you have to be able to balance at least day-to-day spending in the case of Rachel. And that doesn't actually then prevent investing in infrastructure, which is something Andy Burnham's asked a lot for. So we have actually got some fiscal rules at the moment where you can spend more on those long-term things like infrastructure that Andy has made the case for, but you do have to balance the books on day-to-day spending. And as you say, it's a simple choice. If you want to spend more on benefits, you have to put up ordinary people's taxes. If you want to cut benefits, you can then afford to cut taxes. And it doesn't matter who's the Prime Minister, the fundamental reality of economics doesn't change. And I think the kind of vibe of the Labour Party has been that you could somehow, in the run-up to the election, be generous to everyone but not have to tax people. And I think that was a mistake. Like, you have to be very honest with people.
It wasn't a mistake, it was a deliberate lie. I mean, the Tories told the same lie. It's lying. And voters are happy to pretend to believe the lie.
Well, I mean, you and I, Julia, can be the rational human beings in the room that say we have to have a more honest conversation with the public about tax. And my colleagues and I, when we debate this, as people do in any workplace, are like, well, actually, we all understand the fact that in our sort of the Thatcher argument in people's family finances, you can only spend what you bring in. And the nature of this is that because we haven't been growing as a country, at least particularly other parts of the country haven't been growing fast enough, like Greater Manchester, we just don't have enough money to spend on the public services people expect. So I do think there's a debate coming about, is it ever a good idea, for example, to promise you can really cut people's taxes without being really clear about where the savings are going to come from? And I think sometimes, the problem the opposition have got is that the last government promised that they would cut benefits and didn't manage to. And this is the issue Kenny has, is that when you come at it from the right, it's just as incomprehensible that they're going to be able to cut spending because they couldn't do it.
Well, everyone's lying about it. In the end of the day, when people say they want better public services, they don't mind taxes going up to pay for them. What they mean is other people's taxes, like Jeremy Corbyn. Basically, anyone over there, their taxes go up, but not mine, and they're horrified when theirs go up. But if you want to have the same sort of healthcare or the same benefits as you get to, say, France or Germany, you're going to have to pay their taxes, and the tax burden on average earners, people earning 30 grand, is way higher than it is here in the UK. People just, we're going to have to get with the programme. But here's the thing. You think that Andy Burnham would be a good leader. You think he's learnt a lot, been a lot of experience in Greater Manchester, and he would probably, he could make a good leader. All the talk is Angela Rayner coming back as Deputy Prime Minister, someone who doesn't even pay the taxes her own department had brought in on the higher stamp duty for second homeowners. And then we're told Ed Miliband as Chancellor. Even the Labour supporting trade unions are now completely woken up to the fact that Ed Miliband's net zero policies, backed by everyone in Labour, we're told, are going to bankrupt the country. This is not a man who... If Andy Burnham thinks that Ed Miliband should be anywhere near central government, frankly, I wouldn't put him in charge of an ice cream stall, then he wouldn't make a good Prime Minister, would he?
And I think the problem with this kind of fancy football stuff is that, in the end, a soft left dream ticket is not going to happen because Andy Burnham isn't going to be Prime Minister. We know that now. So I think that I'm sure many in the newspapers have rightly got upset about the idea that Ed Miliband would get a promotion. I think they're pretty upset about the fact he's got his current job, and it's filled copy for a few days, but it's just not going to happen. And I think the irony of the net zero being the root of all evil stuff, which I understand why. If it's just about bills being put up, people will never support it. But we had some research out last week, exclusively in The Guardian, that showed that actually in many parts of the North East, for example, Sunderland has more jobs dependent on net zero than anywhere else in the north of England. So
if you tax people, you subsidise people and you require people to make certain changes to homes, which cost an absolute fortune, of course you're going to create jobs. There's money in them there green hills, for goodness sake, Henry. It doesn't mean it's actually going to boost our economy. You know perfectly well. Listen, if you're involved, if you're talking about a powerhouse, you ain't going to be a powerhouse economy to spend money, being able to spend money on pensions and disability benefits and better schools or better hospitals, if you are running your economy and your industrial capacity into the ground with highest energy prices in the world. Why have we got the highest energy prices in the world? Because of net zero policies. You know that. I know that. Anyone who's paying attention, who can do the maths, knows that. I mean, the idea, and again, I'm not playing fantasy football, this stuff isn't made up in Westminster. We know that Ed Miliband was being lined up to be Chancellor if Andy Burnham won the leadership. That would make him, as far as I'm concerned, unfit for office on the grounds of mental instability.
Well, I think clearly the nature of the future Labour leadership, whatever it looks like, if there is a change in leadership, is that nobody's going to get elected to lead the Labour Party without being able to put together a balanced team. And I think it's probably fair to say that as popular as Ed Miliband is with members, when it comes to the general public, obviously back in 2015, when I was still very much involved in the Labour Party day to day, we did test the electoral popularity of Ed Miliband. It didn't necessarily. Yes. So as much as I might agree with Ed's technocratic policies, because there might be some evidence.
You actually do.
I don't necessarily think he's the right face to put on a team.
So we can keep the insane policies, just don't have a man who looks like he's sort of, Greta's mad uncle pushing them.
I think the problem with Ed, and I could write a book on.
I could write a book on
Ed Miliband, is that some of his ideas and what he's actually doing in government are quite sensible. The problem is if you present them as a zealot, people think it's zealotry, and in the end, actually, a lot of what it's doing is probably actually quite sensible economics. Because the one thing that's worse than the net zero energy generation you disagree with, Julia, is being dependent on largely international gas prices, which are driven by the Russian state. And they're driven. Sorry,
apologies. Dependent on international gas prices, driven by
Russia and our enemies, right?
That's an Ed Miliband line. Most of our gas, almost entirely our gas, comes from America or from Norway. That's not Russia. That's not our enemies. And by the way, the whole of Europe is affected by international gas prices, and yet bizarrely we have double the energy prices as countries in Europe. So that's just not true. This is zealotry. This isn't economic fact.
Well, I think the one thing I would say to give the opposing point of view is that if you look at the government's industrial strategy, they are going to cut energy prices for industrial users.
They're not. They're going to subsidise it with our taxes.
Well, no. I mean, it's about who pays in what bit of the system, right? So,
Henry, sorry, we ain't having a powerhouse anything, Northern, Southern, Britain or anything, with all due respect, with people who believe this insane nonsense. I mean this lovingly. You're a nice guy. I'm sure you mean well. You are part of the problem, not part of the solution. I hope you don't mind the honesty, and I'd love you to come on again, but you're part of the problem.
I always enjoy talking to you, Julia, and I think if you went to talk to people in Grimsby who work in the offshore wind industry or people in Hull making turbine blades, I think you would see that there is an economic benefit to this activity, and those jobs. Why
do you go and talk to all the people who don't work in lots of jobs in this country anymore because their factories are closed down because they can't afford the energy because of those subsidies? We can play that game any day. Henry, I'm going to have to leave it there. I'm well over time. Henry Mira says, thank you so much for coming on the show. Tom Slater, this is it. They seem sensible, they're intelligent, they're knowledgeable, but it's not possible to know any facts about this subject and to think that net zero strategy is anything other than lunatic suicide.
And without wanting to beat up on a man who's now not there to defend himself, the only question I always ask is, show me a country in the world that has increased its prosperity or developed to the extent that we have, using the very technologies that you're pursuing. Not a wing and a prayer with loads of investment in the future, but right here and now, concrete example. Show it to me.
Show me an
and if they can, then maybe I'll change mine.
Sri Lanka was doing well doing it, wasn't it? Yeah, till the uprising. Only a matter of time, people. 11:49 is the time. Going to take your calls. Love to hear your reaction to that interview. I don't mean to be rude to a guest. Genuinely, lovely guy. I mean, they mean well, these people. You can't be a strong economy, you can't have jobs, you can't have a strong welfare state even if you want it. You can't defend the nation if you're following net zero. Net zero is the root of all the insanity that we've had from Tories and Labour. Anyone who is supporting this policy simply can't do the maths that a 6-year-old can manage. It is that simple. This is Talk. Get your calls in 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right, calm down. At the end of the heated debate about net zero, there's never a time when I will not get frustrated by people not getting how dangerous that policy is for us. But there we are. I'm sure you'll feel the same way as me. 0344 499 1000. Have your say on any of the topics we're talking about. Lots of you getting in touch about the Home Secretary, as was under the Tories, Suella Braverman being the latest Tory defector to reform. But, you know, there's a lot of putting the band back together. A lot of people are pointing out former Boris Johnson, members of his cabinet. Are Tory defections good or bad for reform in terms of appeal to voters? We already had a caller saying that he's ex-Labour and he went to reform and he's now resigned his membership because it's just a bunch of Tories, he says. But do you need the experience? A lot of people are saying. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Let's go to George, who is in Dundee. George, good or bad thing?
Well, I think it's bad, I think the big defection here is the Reform Party defecting to the Uni Party. We're going to get much the same, it looks like. Braverman, Doris, Jenrick, these are the people who failed to stop immigration. They voted for lockdown. They voted for injecting people. They voted to ruin the economy. It's the same people with a different strap on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. The defence of, say, the likes of Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman is that they were sort of fighting this stuff and left government. Nadine Dorries, I'm sorry, not got a leg to stand on. She was cheerleading for Boris Johnson long after the event, still does. I always thought that was. I mean, again, I like her personally. She's a very personable, very nice lady. But I completely disagree with her on this political move. I would not have allowed her into the reform if I were Nigel Farage.
Well, what they're saying, what Reform are saying is they need people like this in government that know how government works and how to take on the civil service. Well, they took on the civil service and they failed.
Yeah.
So why are they asking these same people back to fail again?
But I'm just trying to give an argument back, which I think would be, but, you know, if you're like an immigration minister or even if you're Home Secretary, if you're taking on the civil service, but your Prime Minister isn't backing you and isn't willing to basically say, sack everybody in your Home Office who's blocking you, let's face it, and the Rishi Sunaks and others were not willing to do that, then you haven't got a hope in hell. You need a Prime Minister who's going to be coming down. The number one job, if Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister, will be to change the law regarding the civil service and who they report to. Because everyone in Whitehall needs to report to their government minister and not to the permanent secretary, not to the blob. They need to report to the minister, and they need to be sackable as well by their minister.
Yeah, but I can see that, Julia. But what they've done with me is was a confirmed reform voter. Now I'm a maybe.
That's interesting. So they can bring in some Tories, but they may be losing people. Do you mind me asking, and feel free not to answer this if you don't want to, but where you were before Reform?
I was Scottish Family Party. You probably haven't heard of them.
No.
But
left wing, right wing?
Right. Okay. Conservative right.
Okay, interesting.
And a very, very good voice in Scotland. Unfortunately, may not get an MSP, but they may. A guy called Richard Lucas, who is fantastic to talk to.
OK, George, thank you very much. Really interesting call, thank you. Paul, on the other side, the end of the country, is in Southampton, wants to have his say on Suella. Good thing or a bad thing for Reform's appeal to voters, Paul?
I think very good. People keep saying why I rang up originally was about having to go have a by-election.
Yeah.
But surely, I mean, with Suella, Jenrick and Kruger, I agree with that last caller about Dorries and one or two others. They're Conservatives. They haven't changed politics.
Yeah.
They've changed party.
So, yeah, that's interesting. Robert Jenrick pointed out, didn't he, that, you know, his whole local area, that every single Tory seat was lost apart from his, because people knew his stance and the challenge from Reform, you know, didn't oust him. And you could argue the same with Suella Braverman as well. I'm of the view always, and I put it to Jenrick and I would put it to Suella if she was on the show, that, you know, if you do move parties, you should have a by-election. And people say, oh, it costs money. I don't care. Democracy costs money. I think if there's not a general election within the next year, I think you should have a by-election.
Well, I would agree if they crossed the floor, but they haven't. They're still Conservatives.
Yeah.
They're just Conservatives by another colour.
Because that is the argument, isn't it, about the Reform, is actually where the Conservatives were just sort of 15, 20 years ago.
Exactly, and I hope and I trust that Farage will do what he says, unlike Mr. Blobby's love child and Slimy Sunak, that they just slipped into the middle.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he knows. I mean, let's face it, Nigel Farage knows. He's been very consistent over the years on the main policies. Yeah, there's a lot of chopping and changing on those various manifesto matters, but at the end of the day, he knows exactly what's going to happen to him. He'll be a busted flush if he doesn't deliver. Really good to talk to you, Paul. Thank you very much. Interesting, two different perspectives there, Tom Slater, from George and Paul. Where are you on this?
Well, I think it comes down to who the defectors are and also what the direction of travel is, really. I mean, this is something which has clearly landed a blow against the Conservatives. Jenrick and Braverman, I should say. Fact-checking myself as a guy.
Fact-check that.
Pronunciation check. Have clearly rattled the Conservative Party in a way that Nadine Dorries or Jake Berry or some of the early ones.
Hence that we've been we did all we could to look after Suella's mental health, but she was very clearly unhappy.
I know, and therein lies the difference, because I think there was a time in which you had people who were streaming into the Conservative Party. I think you could even include Nadeem Zahawi in this, who there was a pretty long rap sheet of them saying the precise opposite of what they're saying right now.
Yeah.
But also in a way that didn't feel genuine, because people can question, as indeed I do, Robert Jenrick's Damascene conversion. How much of this is just ambition? How much of this is real? That's a perfectly legitimate question to make. But that's clearly different when you did resign from the Home Office, when you have been on this path for some time and have been making those arguments. So it's not about are defections from the Conservative Party a problem, it's who are the defectors and how genuine do you think they are and what can they bring.
Absolutely. And again, there's going to have to be a coalition, because all parties are coalitions. If you talk the Labour Party, you look, and the Green Party now and again seems to be a coalition between sort of, Gaza, Islamist extremists, trans activists and complete tree huggers. I mean, I'm not quite sure what these three groups have in common.
Broad mosque, wherever it is.
Very broad mosque indeed. 11:59 is the time. We're going to head to the news, as you can hear from the music. Lots more to talk about, including going to talk to Craig McKinley, now Lord McKinley, about where we are on all things political. Going to take more of your calls. Get in touch, 0344 499 1000. Also going to mark Holocaust Memorial Day today. God, what a day we need to mark that. And also banning phones in schools. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you so much for joining me. With you all the way until 1. Delighted to say that Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, is still with me as well. Coming up in this hour, more on Suella Braverman and that defection to reform. Good thing or a bad thing for the party? So far, calls, I mean split half-half on that. Also, Britain's energy industry facing collapse over Ed Miliband's delusional net zero plan. Oh, who's saying that? Oh, not the terrible right-wingers. No, it's a Labour supporting trade union, because they actually understand the basics of this stuff. Plus, we're going to be talking about the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson's demands that schools completely ban mobile phones and stop pupils even from using them as calculators in class. It's amazing. She can be so clear on mobile phones and yet can't decide whether or not a boy should be allowed in the girls' toilets. Maybe you could have some clarity on that as well, Bridget. That would be helpful, wouldn't it? And of course, we will be marking Holocaust Memorial Day today. Never more important with the rise of anti-Semitism in this country and around the world to mark a Holocaust Memorial Day, to actually make sure people get educated about it. Extraordinary how many schools don't talk about it, don't educate our pupils about it. But also this comes, of course, after yesterday, the final body of an Israeli hostage held in Gaza by Hamas was finally returned. There's a ceremony in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv today to basically, just say, goodbye and end that the yellow ribbons and the campaigns to get the live and the dead hostages back to their families after, wait for it, 844 days. All that coming up. Tom Slater, as I say, is still with me. We're going to talk to Craig McKinley in just a couple of moments. But the energy industry facing collapse over Ed Miliband's delusional net zero plan. This isn't the first time that a trade union on the Labour side has gone, guys, can we please pay attention? GMB Union, the Scotland Secretary GMB Union, Louise Gilmore, has said delusional net zero policies championed by Ed Miliband are causing arguably, she says, the most destructive industrial calamity in our nation's history. It's chaotic and needless rundown of the oil and gas sector. I mean, the left and the right, everyone's woken up and gone, this is mad. We've got Kemi Badenoch is basically talking about getting rid of net zero pretty much. Reform have long been on that side. We've got the left-wing, Labour supporting trade unions saying, wake up, this is about jobs. This is fundamentally about jobs. Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, still absolutely, fully, full-on, going hell for leather towards net zero 2050 targets.
Exactly, and this was always going to happen. I mean, net zero has always been on a collision course with the economy. Reality, and with working people who work in real industry, people who actually don't, cycle around London going to their graphic design jobs. It's a new base for the Labour Party, but it's old base, people who would work on oil rigs or people who would work in refineries or people who would work in what we used to call the old industrial economy. This is a great thing about kind of your old-fashioned private sector, industrial sector, trade unions, is that they're better insulated from all these crazy ideologies because they've got to stick up for the jobs and the living standards of their members. And it's been clear to them for some time now, and they're becoming much more forthright in making these arguments, that this net zero stuff, it might make Ed Miliband feel good about himself, but it will mean the shedding of jobs, and the way in which the unions have compared it to a kind of another closing of the mines is entirely apt, entirely accurate, and it's a Labour government doing it. Following on from where the Tories started, of course, 'twas ever thus, but that's the situation. So the idea that Ed Miliband has still not really come under significant scrutiny, that there's not really been any real discussion about him having to consider his position, given the fact they're pursuing all these policies, even at a point when the economy is very shaky. I think that could well be the story of this year, is at what point is Keir Starmer, very late in the day, but... Too late in the day, but nevertheless, always looking out for his own interests, is going to have to cut him loose or change the policy.
He absolutely is going to have to cut him loose, no question at all. Again, none of this survives contact with reality. Well, let's talk about this to someone who absolutely has been on the right side of this debate for a very long time, and that is the Conservative peer, as was Conservative MP Craig McKinley. Lord McKinley is now the Director of the Global Warming Policy Foundation. A very, very good afternoon to you, Craig.
Hello, how are you? Good to see you.
Lovely to see you, my darling. Now, I mean, you were part of the net zero scrutiny group of MPs in the House of Commons, raising a lot of these concerns. It's left and right. We're told, it's just, we'll all be. I mean, if I had £1 for every pound apparently I'm getting from the oil industry for speaking out against net zero, wow! I tell you what, I wouldn't be at work today, Craig. I'd be off on my own private Caribbean island right now. I like a holiday, funded by an oil field jet, of course. But you've been talking about this. The left are talking about this. The unions are talking about this. As we've always said, none of these policies survive scrutiny with anyone who could do basic maths or contact with reality. And yet it's taking the GMB union to point out we are looking at basically delusional policies, the most destructive industrial calamity in our nation's history. What do you make of that?
Well, I've been trying to reach out for some time to the unions and say, now, come on, guys. It's not my job being lost, it's your members' jobs. And new figures out just yesterday by the Jobs Foundation, actually. They found that there are 200 jobs a week going in Scotland on the back of job losses across oil and gas.
But wait a minute, we were just being told that there's a load of green jobs. That's the future of the economy.
Well, there are lots of green jobs. They're being created in China, of course. They're not being created in Aberdeen and Scotland. Now, Aberdeen was once one of the wealthiest parts of the entirety of Europe in GDP per head. It will now be rapidly going down to the as everything normal in the rest of Scotland level, which will be sort of sub the rest of the UK before too long. Now, we've got to wake up to this. This is going to be a bigger deal than Brexit, because this is infinitely more expensive than Brexit. And it will mean a change of our living standards. There'll be a change to the way we live. And while the rest of the world go, well, you know, you crack on, Britain, we'll have your pottery industries, your glass industries, we'll supply the chemicals, we'll supply the fertilizers, because you lot have been so stupid to actually run down your energy business. We'll be buying gas from the US, from Qatar, and wherever else we can get it at enormous CO2 cost. This isn't saving CO2. All of these measures will actually increase global CO2, but you still have those that are adherent to this new religion say we must bow down to this religion and we must close down Britain.
But it's about
but everyone will follow us. That's the mad thing.
Exactly. But it's the credit.
The world will follow us.
It's the credit and debit sheet for England. We could import everything. We could literally not make a single thing. If we import things, even if they're made literally using the dirtiest coal on the planet, shipped to us in diesel tankers and then shipped to us in oil-powered canal boats, whatever it is. Oh my God, it would still count as us being closer to net zero. That's how mad it is. I mean, it is interesting. I remember you mentioned Brexit. The night before we actually Brexited, there was a big dinner in London for all the Brexit supporting journalists. We were the minority at the time, but we'd become quite people. We put all question time together and things like that. And we all met together, about 50 of us, for a lovely dinner, and it was a very convivial event. And a lot of us talk about what's the next big battle. We've won Brexit. We finally got it through after the battles from 2016, 2019. What's the next big battle?
I'm afraid I'd have to say, have we won it? No,
yeah, well, yeah, but
use the ability that it gave us.
Yes, but nevertheless, but we can punish our governments when they fail now. They can't say it's the EU's fault, and that's why we need to get out of the European Convention and all that, because then they're still using that. But we all agreed the next big battle was net zero. And now then, of course, battles over lockdown, personal freedom, freedom of speech and cultural, that kind of took over a bit. But as a fundamental battle for our nation's future, our independence, our ability to defend ourselves, to fund ourselves, to provide jobs and security, net zero is the argument of the age, isn't it?
Well, it's got to be, because as we follow this net zero madness, we will be losing lots of good jobs. We will be importing more stuff. It will be just the damage of Britain. And we may not have felt it all yet. We certainly feel it in our electricity bills, with all the subsidies, the extra costs. And you wait till we start seeing the march of new pylons across some of Britain's green and pleasant land. You might even find the odd Green starting to stand up against it, especially as they see their pals' jobs disappearing. But I suppose we'll all be wearing jute clothing by then and be happy with it. I
think we'll all be in caves by then if Ed Miliband gets his way.
This will advance, no matter whether you're left or right of viewpoint, because at the end of the day, we all vote with our wallets. And when we see that our wallets are being unnecessarily emptied while the rest of the world are actually profiting from our stupidity, I think this change of view will come, and I can see it coming in a very short time. Now, unfortunately, with Ed Miliband still there in Desnes, he said yesterday, I'm doubling down. It's like sort of some mad gambler that knows he's losing, but they do another roll of the dice with double the money and hope there's going to be a different outcome. He wants to sort of open up the North Sea, close down oil exploration, but have some sort of big network of wind turbines, which only adds to the problems of intermittent renewables.
Indeed.
We are going to face energy crisis. Well, I think we're going to have blackouts in the next few years.
I kind of say bring it on, because the sooner people wake up to this and go, this is insane, the better. Here's the thing. This was all brought in, not under a mad green Corbynite type government. It was brought in under the Conservatives. Theresa May has so much to be held to account for. But, you know, you were MP during this. I know you were speaking out about it. Not enough people were. Under Kemi Badenoch, there's been a lot of backtracking on this. I'm very, very pleased to see. And we now have got two major political parties, Reform and the Tories, basically saying, look, you know, they're going to pretty much dump net zero. I think she's not going quite that far, but that's where the direction of travel is. Can I ask you, in terms of the Tory party and where it is right now, there's a lot of talk about how, you know, if Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick and these other Tories going over to Reform make Reform effectively Tory light. Is there also an element with some of the policy changes under the Tories that the Tories are now just following Reform and are just Reform light? In which case, if you want Reform type policies, why not just vote Reform?
Well, let's go back a long, long way. Let's go back to the 1970s.
Oh, Craig. Sorry, Craig. We lost you there. We lost you for a second. You said go back to the 1970s.
I said, let's go back to the 1970s. The mid-70s, you had pretty dreadful governments under Conservatives under Edward Heath. That didn't mean that there wasn't a potential for a very, very good Conservative government in the back end of the 70s into the 80s, unto a refound, re-excited and energised Conservative Party under Margaret Thatcher. And I think we're seeing quite a bit of that under Kemi Badenoch. We've put our hands up and said this was dreadful, that was dreadful, particularly the net zero pathway was truly horrific. I don't know where on earth it came from. It just seemed to be this creeping infection across our body politic for a decade or so. But we now realise that we did it wrong and we're going to do something different. Now, that isn't being Reform light. That is just being true to Conservative values. Now, if you want me on to try and denigrate what Suella and Rob and all that have done, I won't do that, because I still see a right of centre, no matter where you've come from, how you get there, is infinitely preferable from a socialist Labour government. And I think we have to have a realism between Reform and Conservatives, that we seem to be chewing chunks out of each other. We're not the enemy of each other. The enemy of each other are sitting opposite both Reform and Conservatives in the House of Commons. They are the Labour Party that are increasingly following socialist ideals. And if we can't stop doing this to each other, then Labour will win with a coalition of the left.
Well, hold on a minute. We've got a Gorton and Barton by-election coming up, possibly as early as the 26th of February. Yeah. We're going to have the Reform candidate announced later today. The Labour candidate decided on by the weekend, but it ain't going to be Andy Burnham, the only Labour candidate who realistically would have a good chance of winning at that Manchester seat as the very popular mayor of Greater Manchester. Certainly for Keir Starmer's own interests, he believes the party's interest. He has done the right thing, he thinks, in terms of blocking him from doing that. But would it, given that we've got the Muslim vote pushing, literally an organisation called Muslim Vote, pushing sectarian voting and suggesting they vote Green, as now we're told this could be a battle between the Greens and Reform, would you encourage Tory voters in Gorton and Barton to vote for Reform?
Oh dear, there are going to be so many dynamics going on in that seat. You don't have to go back very far for
Gordon and Denton.
Yeah, Gordon and Denton, for the Welsh seat of Caerphilly just a few months ago. Now, a very strange outcome. Plaid Cymru were nowhere in the running, but there seemed to be a sort of a coalescing around anyone but Reform. If you didn't want Reform, you voted for whoever looked like they might win. Now, there could be all sorts of similar things going on in Gorton and Denton. There could be Labour voters completely sick to death of Labour, starting to be attracted to the Greens. There could be whoever sort of is anti-Reform might go to the Greens. The Conservative voters might go Reform. This could go any which way, and I wouldn't even like to forecast.
But if it's a battle, fundamentally, ain't going to be the Tories who win it. Even Labour have conceded they're not going to win it. If it's down between Reform and the Greens, you've made it quite clear you would prefer Reform to win. Should the Tories therefore pull their candidate? Should Tories vote for Reform?
No, Conservative Party is a party that puts candidates up wherever there is an election.
Should they?
That's what we do. We're a national political party, and I think you'll find even in sort of by-elections and council elections, the Conservative Party is the party that puts more candidates up than anybody else. So that would not be the way forwards. I mean, it is a by-election, a halfway house through a parliament, not even halfway yet. So it doesn't really mean as much as a general election. And as you know, by-elections are a time when people can give one side or the other a bit of a kicking. It's not going to change a government. But yes, you're probably right that it's not going to be Labour winning this one, and it's probably not going to be the Conservatives. I do live in the real world. But the dynamic of Burnham was a strange one. He was probably the only Labour candidate that would have had a chance. I actually still think he would have lost. Because I think the Labour brand is just now so sullied. Anyone wearing a Labour badge, I think, has got no chance.
Then he'd been out of both jobs.
I'm not going to stand up for what the National Labour Party NEC have decided, but I believe that when Burnham took the role as mayor, he signed a pledge that he would see the seat through for the term, and not start jumping to other, more interesting opportunities. So, he did a deal, and he stood for that election.
I think that's the only argument that actually
that's the only thing I would say to their credit.
Yeah, I think that's the only argument Keir Starmer should have said. Like, you said you'd serve 4 years, you have to serve the 4 years, full stop. Great to talk to you, as always. Apologies, quality of that line a few times there. Craig at Lord McKinley, Conservative Director of the Global Warming Policy Foundation. Tom Slater, listening to all of that, editor of Spiked Online. We've discussed the net zero issue. Let's come back to, the Gordon and Denton by-election. Again, let's face it, people in Westminster, people like you and me, spend far too much time talking about by-elections. There comes a point once the actual date is completely called and all the candidates in place, when we actually stop talking about it other than news, because we're then constrained by, you have to talk for only, you literally, in terms of the guests, you've like one guest on who's a candidate, you have to have them all on, and they have a certain amount of time. It's an absolute nightmare, bureaucracy-wise. And let's face it, if you don't live there, really don't give two hoots. I'm sorry, you really don't. But even if it's a battle ends up being between the Reform Party and the Green Party, I mean, it's a pretty clear choice there, isn't it?
Yeah, you would think so, but could well be a taste of things to come. I think one big question which hangs over this by-election, but also generally speaking, the electorate going forward, is how are these elections going to be framed? Because if it's anyone but Reform, as we saw in Caerphilly, as you were discussing there, then that can be quite a powerful sort of mobilising force for people who couldn't think of anything worse than Nigel Farage.
And particularly for the sort of people who vote in local elections, who tend to be in much smaller numbers than in general.
The people who tend to be more motivated, these are much lower turnout. Therefore, if you've got a more motivated group of people, then that is what wins the day. It's not to say that you can't see it on the other side, but Reform, historically, if you look at its voter composition, is often converting people who have been, not voting for political parties for some time, or switching around, or not necessarily kind of dyed-in-the-wool activists in the same way.
But often older Tory voters are the most likely people to vote at all.
No, exactly. So there's all these things are in the mix. Yeah. But going forward, I think it's if this by-election or the next election, shall we say, if it's a question of do you want Keir Starmer to be Prime Minister, that's an election that Reform could easily win. If it's a question of do you want to keep out Reform, that's one that they could lose depending on the seat and depending on the area. So these things are very finely balanced and be interesting to see how they play.
And it's amazing how often these elections, same with like local elections as well, how people, not actually having conversations about the stuff that actually matters to people, about, 20-mile-per-hour zones, bin collections, local schools, the stuff that actually people really do care about. Now, there's something we talked about a little bit earlier on the show, and we didn't get a chance to, we had Richard Tice on straight after us to have a conversation with you about it, and this is this story about this payout of £12,000 to a woman called Sophie Stone, a neurodivergent events freelancer who was apparently left triggered when her boss made a remark along the lines of no thinking outside the box, get back in your box. This because she said she has neurodivergent issues. She was invited to the office summer party. She doesn't normally go in the office, and she felt anxious about if she needed somewhere like a breakout zone if she felt uncomfortable. And there was a conversation about all of this, and basically the manager just wanted to close the conversation down and basically, I think on a Zoom or Teams call, and basically said, get back in, get back in your work box and let's get on with things. And this events planner has claimed this is a breach of her human right to respect. She was instructed, she feels, to act be normal and don't rock the boat. It was a work call. They were wittering on about where she should go. She felt anxious. She was at a summer party. and I've got no issue with Sophie Stone. I wouldn't employ her. I'm not going to lie. I wouldn't employ her because she's brought this case alone. But £12,000 payout because she suffers from rejection sensitivity because of her neurodivergence. She is extra sensitive to being rejected. This is madness. I mean, whatever the neurodivergent issue is, and yeah, absolutely, people can have many different ways that their brains work and they can still be great employees. We cannot run the entire world around people who need to be wrapped in cotton wool to cope with life. That is not how you have a strong future as a country, as a nation, as a culture. This is madness.
No, it's impossible to disagree with that. I think there's a couple of things, one of which is that without knowing this woman, I wouldn't want to speak too definitively, but if you read some of the details here, there's a big issue here. First of all, with the fact that if you create an environment which everything can be reshaped around one individual because of their particular needs, whether real or imagined, then you're going to create a situation in which you cannot reasonably run a business. Everyone can understand that. Second of all, it's because of the fact that these kind of mental health categories have so expanded as well. It makes one a lot more cynical about whether or not these are legitimate claims to begin with, which is something that I think is worth considering in all of this. And also, as you were talking about earlier, when discussing this story, this is going to become a disincentive to employers taking on anyone who has or claims to have any of these neurodivergent.
It's like completely extending maternity rights. So basically, you can do whatever you want, have a baby the day the day after you start a job, and you're entitled to everything.
Have the baby, then crack on again. It's not really
employers just aren't going to employ women of age. And also, it's going on about women. Apparently, none of us can function because of the menopause. Okay, well, I wouldn't employ a woman who was going to have a kid or was going through the menopause on that basis if I was an employer.
I know I'm all for workers' rights. I'm all for making sure that people who might have particular needs or particular mental health conditions or whatever have a route into the workforce. But you don't have any of those rights if you don't have a job. If you create an environment in which all you can do compel people to hire these people,
I think yes. No, that's what they've done by having those targets and quotas. Yes,
it's entirely fine that some people, for no fault of their own, are not going to be able to do a particular job. That is also fine. Finding something fulfilling, worthwhile for them to do is a perfectly legitimate policy area to discuss. But you cannot try and put square pegs in round holes.
If you're in a wheelchair, you're not going to be a very good scaffolder.
Yeah,
but we don't say no. Scaffolders have got to hire people in wheelchairs. But again,
it will get to the point where you'll have someone in a wheelchair like suing a construction company because of the fact that they couldn't put a ramp up the scaffolding. I mean, these things could easily happen given how out of hand.
It's just madness. And again, I'm with you again. Really, really important. And I know people who've been treated appallingly at workplaces and sacked because they got pregnant. People who had to put up with sexism, racism. And I don't mean someone making a comment calling someone a girl or something. I mean outrageous sexual harassment and things like that. And that's happened to people I know. And absolutely. This is what these tribunals are for, and we should absolutely, bosses need to know you can't get away with this stuff. And other work colleagues need to know. But I mean, come on, this is making a laughing stock of this stuff, isn't it? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that story. 0344 499 1000. If you're not too if we don't take your call, I don't want you to be rejection sensitive. I mean, God, if I was rejection sensitive, good Lord. I mean, you try being a freelance journalist over the years. Good Lord. Anyway, we're going to take your calls up next. You're still calling in about Suella Braverman and about her defection to the Reform Party. Was it good for the Reform Party to take a load more Tories, or is it bad for the Reform Party when it comes to their appeal to more voters across the country? I want to hear your thoughts on that specifically. 0344 499 1000. Your call's up next. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:29 is the time. Just a few moments, we're going to be talking about Holocaust Memorial Day. Never more important, the rise of anti-Semitism, not just in Britain, but across the world, that we need to be marking that important day and looking about, well, you know, what we need to learn from it for now and in the future as well. That's coming up after more of your calls on Suella Braverman defecting from Tories to Reform. Is that good for Reform, though? We've already had one caller, Ian, say, you know, he's actually resigned from the party. It's just going to become Tory light. What does Neil in Buckinghamshire think? Well, let's find out. Good afternoon to you, Neil.
Afternoon. Yeah, I'm a bit sceptical of all these Reform people saying, oh, they're going to not do this, they're not going to do that. I don't think they're real reformers. I think they're probably Labour people trying to stir the crap and everything else. The problem is, Kemi Badenoch says, I'm going to do this, this and this. She won't do anything. It's easy to say in opposition what you can do, but when you get in the government and you've got wet Liberals still in the party, they're not going to change. So that's not. So the only way forward is to get the real Conservatives, because Reform in a way are like the new Labour of the 90s. It's exactly the same.
Are they the new Conservatives in that sense?
Yes, yeah, proper Conservatives that we haven't had, but with the Reform side of it. Reform the things that even Labour voters can. I've voted Labour, I've voted Tory, I've voted UKIP. I'm a floating voter.
So am I.
So why can't the Tory MPs decide, well, this party, she's not doing what I want her to do, but Nigel is. I like what he says. Why can't they change? Yeah,
I mean, that's the thing. I'm one of the things I've always find so frustrating is when there are people who say, well, I don't agree with this party on X, Y and Z, but my parents voted for them and I've always voted for them. I'm a Labour voter or I'm a Tory voter and that's who I vote for. They don't listen to those people. They only listen to floating voters. You know, they always, well, that talk was it Worcester woman or Essex man or whatever it is. You need to be someone who will take your vote elsewhere if you don't get what you want. That's how it works in a democracy.
The way you should be voting for yourself. Whatever benefits you.
No, I disagree. I think you should be voting for the right thing for the country. Well, it depends. I'm doing well in life. I don't think I should be voting to benefit myself financially. I vote like Brexit. Realistically, I probably would have been better off in personally with remaining rather than Brexit. Oh, wonderful supply of cheap nannies, cleaners, lovely, jubbly, North London. You know, but my view was I think I should vote for what I think is right for the country and the people of this country as a whole.
I see, that's where I disagree. I think you vote for what's going to benefit yourself and your family, because your family is your priority. That comes before your country. So if it means voting for, so that's where we differ. I would put my family before my country, then my country.
I understand that. I
will protect my family to the day's end.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, that's the number one job. I agree with you on that. I suppose I felt like my family were buffered enough that they were. Well, I could vote for what I thought was the right thing for the country and other people. But absolutely support you on that. Really interesting point, Neil. I kind of say the quality of the calls. I mean, absolutely stonking a lot of this week. I mean, every week actually, but just always really interesting to hear different perspectives. Carl is in Liverpool. Wants to have his say on Suella Braverman's defection. Afternoon to you, Carl.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Where are you on this then?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't mind it if we're getting the centre-right, the right of the Tory party or Labour. We have to look at it as Reform are just starting off. They don't have enough people with the experience to be in Parliament, so they're going to get people will come over.
Yeah.
But like Nigel said, after the 7th of March, that's it.
7th of May. I tell you what's interesting. I think people forget that people like, Lee Anderson. Lee Anderson was a Tory MP. You'd forget that now, wouldn't you? He's just soul of the Reform Party.
Yeah, it is. But like you said to the previous caller, I do agree with him. Family before country. But I vote on policy. I'm a floating voter, and you have to go with what's best for the country, because whatever's good for the country is also good for your family.
Yeah.
It works both ways. But again, Reform need experience, Julia, and this is where it's going to get it from.
Okay.
And as long as they get the right people, that's okay. If if you get people in that we know that aren't right, but Richard Tice said it earlier on. We will not take people who don't match our values, and that's all we want. And their values match our values, which is we want what's best for the country, immigration, lower bills, etc., etc. And they are the only ones that are singing to our tune. So I'm happy for it to keep going. I think it's a good move. Suella Braverman's brilliant. You had Robert Jenrick last week. I think it's just going to get better and better. Okay. And they are kind of the new Tories in a way, but they are the right side.
But again, it's interesting. The Labour caller earlier, ex-Labour who's in Reform and now he says he's left Reform, is interesting when you look at Margaret Thatcher's appeal. I mean, she, the reason she was elected was because she appealed to people who had previously been, working class Labour voters, and we've seen that turned on its head, haven't we? Republicans in America and the Tories, Reform in the UK, where the left-wing parties have just completely deserted working class sort of left-wing voters and just basically gone, well, we're worried about ourselves and in Europe rather than worried about our own people. I'm going to have to leave it there, Carl. Thank you so much. At 12:35, it's almost the time. Take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking about why, as we mark Holocaust Memorial Day, we should be talking more about what's happening in the present and in the future and what those lessons from all those years ago can teach us now. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tom Slater is still with me as well. And we're joined right now by Gideon Falter. He's Chief Executive at Campaign Against Anti-Semitism to mark Holocaust Memorial Day, which is, of course, marked every year. About that, one of the most awful, horrific events in human history. Good afternoon to you, Gideon.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Now, it's interesting, a lot of the times when we mark this day, we will talk to a survivor, a family member from the camps, and we talk about what happened in the past. And it's vitally important to do that. And I'm quite horrified by something like half of schools in Britain now no longer teach about Holocaust Memorial Day, which is a very big worry because you can't learn the lessons of the past if you don't know the past. But it seems to me today, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is that actually, this isn't a historical conversation anymore. This seems to me to be a conversation and a threat that is in the here and now and the future, and which is why we need to learn those lessons even more, but also learn the lessons for how we deal with things now. What would you say to that?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the message that comes out of the Holocaust traditionally is the words "never again." The slogan almost "never again," and people keep intoning this. It's something which will be said countless times by politicians today at commemorations up and down the country, and it should be the message of the Holocaust. But instead, we're now living in a country where, in common with other countries across the West, but disgracefully here in Britain, more than half of the Jewish community no longer sees a long-term future here. Yeah. And if you look at our young people particularly, you know, that one of the things that Holocaust survivors have dedicated their lives to was to trying to educate the next generation against hatred. And we're now in a place where vast numbers of young people in this country, according to our YouGov polling, actually think extremely anti-Semitic things. 1 in 10 18 to 24-year-olds think that people are just talking about the Holocaust to further some kind of Jewish agenda. You've got now vast numbers, I think 16% of 18 to 24-year-olds who think that the October 7th atrocities, which were the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, they think that that was justified. That's 16%. If you imagine you're walking around a school corridor, 16% of those kids potentially believe that. And then it goes even further. They think now that the new Nazis are the Israelis, 48% of young people believing that. And they go in for all sorts of conspiracy theories that the Nazis themselves propagated. Things like, you know, supporters of Israel are a bad influence on our democracy. Israel supporters control the media. That was a famous sort of Nazi narrative that Jews control the media. And then if you look at the actual impact of this, we're seeing a campaign against anti-Semitism, vast numbers of parents, children, students at universities coming to us with really serious problems. And there was, of course, the case just recently of a Labour MP, Damien Egan, Jewish MP, who wanted to go and visit a school in his constituency. The school said no, because it might inflame not the students, but the teachers. Now, if the teachers are too extreme to be able to countenance the presence of a Jewish MP in their midst, what does that tell you? And we're hearing allegations, for example, that the diversity coordinator who sits on the charitable trust that runs the school had in the past made comments supportive of Hamas. I mean, we're not doing a great job on the never again front if our young people are more radicalized and more bigoted than any generation that has gone before them, pretty much in living memory. If, as our Holocaust survivors who have dedicated their lives to trying to make this country a better place, trying to educate against hate with all of their might, if they are passing away, each of them saying that they are absolutely horrified by the level of extremism and anti-Semitism in this country, we're not doing a very good job. And hand-wringing at Holocaust memorial ceremonies is not going to fix it. Our politicians, successive governments need to step up.
Indeed, saying the right words. Look, I did a speech for your campaign outside Number 10 after the horrific terror attack, the murders you're very kind, at Manchester Synagogue. And again, words are fine, and it's, you know, everyone turns up and they, as you say, they wring their hands, but they're not taking action. The reality is, we've got two problems, I think. One is that we have imported anti-Semitism from huge numbers of immigrants who've come from Muslim countries where, and again, everyone gets embarrassed and a bit uncomfortable with this, where anti-Semitism is completely the norm. It is the absolutely perfectly acceptable, normal viewpoint. We've also seen it growing on the left as well. For a long time, it was only seen as a problem on the right. Massively growing on the left, the views of many of those who were supporting Jeremy Corbyn. What we see, the bots and the like online pushing a lot of this stuff. Some of the stuff, and God knows what you get on your social media, the stuff that I get. I mean, by the way, I'll be getting my 7,000, I never know, is it shekels, dollars or pounds from the Israeli government for making this comment. I keep saying to everyone, can I have it in pounds? It's worth more. I've looked at the exchange rates. I'm definitely better off getting it in pounds. Never had a single penny. I spout my views because I spout them because they're what I believe. But this thing, the conspiracy theories around this, are really quite sinister, really quite terrifying. And anyone who's not been to a Holocaust museum, anyone who's not learned about this, for the love of God, go along and see how this starts. Because when we talk about the dangers internationally, and I often talk about, you know, we're in the 1930s internationally, but we're also well into the 1930s when it comes to dealing with anti-Semitism. And there's no doubt anti-Semitism at every time, in every country, in every nation, across the world, in every era, has been the canary in the coal mine that something is going horribly, horribly wrong. And it is extraordinary to me, the lack of action that we are seeing against anti-Semitism when we are seeing it being allowed to be just basically played out on our streets every single day without anyone doing anything?
Yeah, I mean, look, just look at the state of things in the UK now, where we've got these stories coming through, not just of anti-Semitic extremists, but also of police forces failing abjectly to do enough. I mean, look at this scandal in the West Midlands, where the police chief and others in the top brass have tried to fit up, essentially, Israeli football supporters so that they can ban them from the town. Now, if you told me 10, 15 years ago that we were going to have a situation in which Jewish football supporters were told that they couldn't enter the city of Birmingham, the second city of the UK, if they were told that they couldn't, I would not have believed you.
I wouldn't have believed it 3 years ago.
An MP, a Jewish MP, would be turfed out of their local school by the teachers. I mean, this is the situation that we find ourselves in, where the authorities themselves are, instead of standing up to these anti-Semites, which is surely what the lesson of the Holocaust must be, instead of standing up to them, they're appeasing them. And you're absolutely right to call it out. You know, the far right was traditionally the bastion of sort of neo-Nazi hatred. But the far right, and this is not me saying this is our polling of the Jewish community. The Jewish community is saying the far right is a worry, but it is far less of a worry than the far left. But above the far left even are Islamist extremists.
Yes.
And those are the primary problem that the Jewish community perceives in the polling. And you just have to look around at some of the situations that we're seeing. There are Islamist extremists who are essentially able to call the shots in their local police force. There are teachers, far left teachers, who are able to tell their school that they don't want a Jewish MP there. Yep. And there are many, many cases.
Hey, yeah, no, by the way, sorry, the guys who decided to have their pro-Palestinian flags and drive down from the north of England to North London and drive through a largely Jewish area, driving it very close to my home, shouting with the megaphone on camera, it's all on camera, that they were going to rape the wives and daughters of Jews in the local area. They're talking about my friends, my daughter's friends. Eventually, after a big enough outcry, they got their collars felt. No prosecution. If you're not prosecuting people shouting about raping women and girls publicly on camera in a public street in daylight, you ain't taking anti-Semitism. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. Can I just ask you, on a more positive note, and this is a positive note, we saw the final body of Israeli hostage, this is Rangvili, returned from Gaza. The IDF found him, not returned by Hamas, who were claiming the credit. They had mysteriously couldn't find him. He was finally returned. He's the final dead hostage. We had, thankfully, the live hostages home already after 844 days since October the 7th. There's going to be a ceremony at Hostage Square, which was when I went to Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, one of the most moving experiences of my life last September, where, you know, they're going to turn off the clock that was counted those days, those days, those weeks, those months, those, you know, minutes, the seconds. Where are we on that? Where we are in anti-Semitism in this country, and where we are with what's going on in the Middle East? Where does that take us?
The first thing is that this is, frankly, a miracle. I think in the wake of October 7th, there was no one that really expected that every single last hostage, alive or dead, would be brought back from Gaza. And so I think everybody who's been watching this, and particularly people in the Jewish world, have felt that this was, frankly, a miraculous event. It's also a very sad event because, of course, the last hostage returns from Gaza dead in a coffin. Yeah. And so many of them did, including children, including a 9-month-old baby who Hamas kidnapped and then brutally murdered. Yeah. So I think the first thing is, what an achievement. The second thing, I think, is look at how this happened. This only happened, that the last hostage was retrieved from Gaza, because the Israeli government did not listen to Britain and others in the West who kept saying, oh, you mustn't go there, you mustn't go there, you mustn't keep on fighting. And unfortunately, this was a war in which it was necessary for Israel to go and retrieve the hostages themselves. This was not a hostage who was retrieved because Hamas kept to the terms of the ceasefire. This was a hostage who was retrieved because the Israeli army went and retrieved that hostage. And I think for many people in the West who've been throughout this whole thing, essentially doing the job of Hamas propaganda, I think need to look at themselves and realize that they failed. They failed to understand the nature of the evil terrorists that Israel was dealing with. They failed to understand what is necessary to defeat them. And Israel didn't listen. But if we in the West take our own advice that we have been giving to Israel, we are doomed. Right now, the National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell, is allegedly telling Keir Starmer that he thinks Hamas shouldn't have to completely disarm. What on earth is this appeasement that has taken hold of Britain? And, you know, taking it back to Holocaust Memorial Day, surely the proudest thing about Britain's involvement in the Second World War is that the policy of appeasement was something which Neville Chamberlain started and Winston Churchill resoundingly ended, and we fought tooth and nail against evil.
Absolutely.
And we realised that sometimes you have to fight your enemy and give no quarter.
Absolutely, and thank God we did. Absolutely, and I feel we're going to be fighting again. Gideon Falter, Chief Executive of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, thank you so much for joining us. Such an important day, Holocaust Memorial Day. Tom Slater, listening to all of that.
I'm just always pondering the question, where are the anti-fascists these days? Because if you think about the left constantly calling everyone to the right of Rachel Reeves, the F word, and yet both on our streets, but also most violently and apocalyptically in Gaza and southern Israel with Hamas's pogrom on October the 7th, you saw the closest thing that we have to a fascistic movement, the anti-Semitism, the barbarism, the desire to impose its totalitarian writ on the world, and yet everyone's been staring at their shoelaces, or worse, making excuses for them, or worse, openly supporting them. On our streets. In the future, we will look back with a mix of horror and bemusement at this period, I think.
Horror mostly, I have to say. 12:50 is the time. We're going to take a quick break, going to talk about lighter things and whether or not we should see that full phones ban for kids in school. Bridget Phillipson's very, very, very clear on this. Still unsure whether boys should be in girls' toilets, though. Very strange. We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. 12:53 is the time. Mark Lehane joins us now. He's an executive head teacher at Wooden Academy Trust and a former special advisor under various education ministers under the Conservatives. And wants to talk to us about, are these schools being told by Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, that schools must ban all phones all day, not even calculators, nothing. Full stop, end of debate. Is she right, Mark?
Yes, I think she absolutely is right, and I was delighted to see her email ping into my inbox yesterday morning. The only thing I would say is it's one thing saying that schools should ban the use of phones. Most schools have got some kind of ban.
Yeah.
The devil really is in the detail. It's got to be a really effective ban. The research is clear. You need to make sure the phones are not on the students or they're going to be distracted by them.
Exactly.
Or they're going to access. And as we found here at my upper school when we introduced a harder ban this year, the big pushback comes not just from the students, but from their parents.
Oh, yes.
When you go to confiscate their phones.
Oh, absolutely. And again, you have to be really strict. I remember even my daughter's school, which was a very sort of strict academic school, which was and they had a nightmare trying to get the kids not to have their phones. It seemed to be very, very simple. You have your phone with you. You're not supposed to have it with you. It's an automatic detention. Second time, suspension for a week. Third time, you're out of the school. Everyone will pay attention. It's really easy to focus minds with clear, structured punishments. Everyone would know. But it's interesting how often the parents, they'll be defending their kids, or they'll say, but I need to message little Johnny or Jane during the day. Well, my parents never had to message me when I was at school. They coped perfectly well. Long before we had mobile phones. Their parents are part of the problem, aren't they?
Well, listen, I mean, look, these are incredible devices. We all use them in our adult lives, but of course, children are not adults, and we have to protect them from themselves. Now, we made a big shift at my schools this academic year for two really important reasons. One, we realised that some bad stuff was going on in our school that we got wind of. So even though we had what I would call like a soft ban, so you're not allowed your phone out at any point. If we see it, we'll take it till the end of the day. That wasn't working. Bad stuff was.
Can I say that is such a light punishment?
Oh no, totally. And that punishment wasn't working. And the other thing was, when we spoke to students, what they told us was they felt that they needed to check their phones at break time, lunchtime, hiding in the toilets, because fear of missing out from their friends' conversations, but also, as you've intimated, from their parents. So we've moved to a much firmer ban now. If we catch a child with their phone a second time, we will confiscate it for a school week. And now just emphasise the word school. If they lose it on a Friday before half term, we will keep it till the Friday after half term. But what's been really interesting is the pushback from parents. In fact, we had to call the police last week because a parent was turning up insisting that their phone was returned to them. Now, I feel very lucky. As you mentioned, I worked in government before, and in fact, one of the policy documents I got to have sight of and approve on behalf of the minister when I was in government was the screening, searching and confiscation guidance that schools have to work to. So I'm all over the law on that. I'm very clear what we can and can't do, but not every head will have that confidence. So what I really want to see from the government now is just saying to schools you should ban phones, but backing schools openly about what power
why not just make it the law? I mean, we understand most schools have got these rules, they don't really enforce them, there's still a problem. And again, it's the kids who most need the good education to get ahead in life who are missing out the most on this. It's failing children by not bringing in this ban. But again, there's plenty of other things they seem to sort of give rules about. It seems to me this is a no-brainer and was a no-brainer even 5 years ago. Really interesting to get your perspective. Thank you, Mark Lehane, Executive Head Teacher at Wootton Academy Trust. Thank you for that. Tom Slater's still with me. I mean, again, we're all sitting here with our phones, aren't we? Ian Collins has joined us in the studio to tell us what's happening on his show. Always got my phone because, again, there'll be stories. My producer needs to message me, and we need. But the whole point is, your concentration is everywhere, and the kids, someone sent someone on YouTube. There's a video. There's something on TikTok. They're going to be distracted. But isn't it interesting? The government has finally got strict. Bridget Phillipson, really clear guidance on this, but doesn't seem to know whether boys should be allowed in girls' toilets or not. Not sure about that yet.
Well, it's a small victory, Julia. At least they're getting somewhere.
At least if the boys are in the girls' toilet, they can't have their phone with them.
No,
Yay.
At some point, Bridget Phillipson will pick up that phone of hers and Google the phrase biological sex.
And Supreme Court judgment.
And the penny will finally drop. But until that point, at least the kids will not... more of them will not have their phones at their hand.
The whole time we're talking, I'd like to point out Ian Collins is sitting there studiously looking at his phone.
You don't want to know what he's looking at.
I do not want to know what he's looking at.
It involves a VPN. Let's just say that.
Ian Collins, hello, Ian. Hi. Oh, listen, pay attention at the back of the class.
I'm so sorry. Wordle in 3. It's not bad, is it?
You don't do Wordle, do you? No. Do you know, I've had to give up Sudokus. I got totally addicted to them.
Did you really?
I'm back to crosswords.
Like therapy and stuff?
No, but literally... Not quite. No, I could probably bring a tribunal based on that. What do you make of that? Have you got, what is it? What was the term? There was this ridiculous term this person's got, rejection sensitivity.
Oh, what was that all about?
You got rejection sensitivity?
No.
I mean, come on, look at you. You must have been rejected plenty of